Good morning, beautiful people. Let's look at the latest on the Iran war, okay?
Just moments ago, President Trump with a whole lot to say about Iran on his way from the White House to an event in Florida. President Trump telling our own Peter Ducey he's weighing his options about what to do next.
The CENTCOM commander come in here yesterday. Was he briefing you on a different approach, options? What kind of options? How would it look different?
There are options. I mean, do we want to go and just blast the hell out of him and finish him forever, or do we want to try and make a deal? I mean, those are the options.
Do you want to go blast the hell out of him?
I prefer not. Forever? On a human basis, I prefer not, but that's the option. Do we want to go in there heavy and just blast them away, or do we want to do something? They're a very disjointed leadership, as you can understand, Peter. Very disjointed. I mean, they're not getting along with each other, and it puts us in a bad position. One group wants to make a certain deal. The other group wants to make a certain deal, including the hardliners. The hardliners want to make a deal, too. Why wouldn't they? They have no Navy. They have no Air Force. They have no anti-aircraft. They have no nothing.
Well, it was a news-filled departure for President Trump as he makes his way to Florida now. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith on this Friday in New York. John, good to be with you.
Good to make it to the end of the week with you, Sandra. I'm John Roberts in Washington. This is America Reports. Iranian state media reporting Tehran sent its new proposal through Pakistan, claiming its top priority is peace. But President Trump says it's been hard to get any sort of concrete deal because it's hard to tell who's running the country.
We are going to dig into all of this and much more with White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly joining us in moments.
First, though, to Lucas Tomlinson, who's live on the ground in Dubai with the very latest from the region. Hi, Lucas.
Good afternoon, John. The UAE celebrating its first day OPEC-free, as we just heard from President Trump leaving the White House. He says he's not happy with this latest proposal from Iran. Here he was just a few minutes ago.
In terms of the negotiation telephonically, they've made strides, but I'm not sure if they ever get there.
And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent calling the Iranian regime sewer rats in his post on X, also adding the United States has complete control of the Strait of Hormuz. There is a hard currency, i.e. the U.S. dollar shortage. Food and gasoline rationing are in place. The entire international community has turned against you, and the blockade will continue until there is pre-February 27 freedom of navigation. President Trump calling the nearly 3-week-old blockade a success. The U.S. Military Central Command said it has turned away 44 ships. Others remain pierside in Iran, others at anchor. The U.S. Navy's blockade has made life even more miserable from Iran's 93 million people, as you can see by this chart. Some think Iran's economy is on the verge of destruction. Americans back home also feeling the effects of the war. The national average of the price of gasoline is the highest in 4 years. In an effort to fill the gap, U.S. crude oil exports have hit record highs, surpassing 6 million barrels a day. General Jack Keane warned this morning he thinks the war is at a stalemate.
I do think we'll probably move on and do something here other than the blockade, because the blockade in of itself, I don't believe is going to force any concessions out of these people, given who they really are.
The president was asked what part of Iran's offer he didn't like. He said, Iran is asking for things that I can't agree to. John?
Yeah, one of them, I think, is to maintain its nuclear program. We'll see. Lucas Tomlinson for us, kicking us off from Dubai. Thank you, Lucas.
All right, John, thank you. Let's bring in White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly. Welcome to the program. Good to have you here. Very newsy departure for the president just a few moments ago at the sunny White House as he makes his way down to sunny Florida. I want to pick up where Lucas just left off, Anna, and ask you about President Trump saying that Iran is asking for things that I can't agree with. Can you give us any more color as to exactly what that is and what the conversations are?
Well, sure. I'll say that Iran is absolutely desperate to make a deal. Of course, they have been totally decimated militarily. The United States military totally obliterated their ballistic missiles, their production facilities, weakened their proxies, achieved all of the goals outlined under Operation Epic Fury. And now they are being totally strangled economically, partially through the tremendously successful blockade that is causing them to lose $500 million in revenue every single day. And a lot of those oil tankers that were once headed to Iranian ports, now they are headed to the big, beautiful Gulf of America, filling up on American oil. So while the Iranian regime is getting weaker and weaker, the United States is getting stronger and stronger. And so the president has all the cards, as he said. He was not satisfied with their latest proposal because, rest assured, this president has an incredible track record of only making good deals for the American people. And any deal will ensure that this long and short-term threat posed by a nuclear Iran is eliminated for good.
And unfortunate timing there with the Park Service lighting up the lawnmower.
Always.
Hope you can hear us all right. So Lucas Tomlinson talked about this a short time ago. Gas prices in this country are not as high as they were in the Biden administration, but creeping up there. $4.39 current average compared to $4.05 a week ago and $3.19 a year ago. This is what the president said yesterday on gas prices.
The gas will go down as soon as the war's over. It'll drop like a rock. There's so much of it. It's all over the place, sitting all over the oceans of the world, and it'll go down. But what won't happen is if Iran had a nuclear weapon and used it, then the whole world is a different place.
Clearly, the world would be a different place if Iran got hold of a nuclear weapon. But right now, the economic situation for many Americans is becoming a different place because of the price of gas. How long does the president expect that these high gas prices will be with us? And what does he say to people who are having trouble putting gas in the tank?
Thank you, Sour Patch.
The
It's
president
okay.
has been clear-eyed all along the way about the short-term
Hey, Sally.
temporary disruptions that would occur as a result of Iran's attempts to subvert the free flow of energy in the Strait of Hormuz. But the good news is that this president built just over the past year and in his first term a strong and resilient economy that, as he said, is not only going to send us back to where we were before, but better than we ever were before. Of course, America is now the largest producer of oil than anybody in the world. So as I said earlier, a lot of those tankers are now headed to buying American oil, and this economy is going to be able to bounce back even better than before once this long-term volatility presented by a nuclear threatening Iran is eliminated for good.
Anna, can I circle back where we started as you were detailing how the strategy on the part of the United States and President Trump has dismantled the Iranian economy, crippled it, as the president continues to detail. But specifically to what he just said, when he said, quote, that Iran is asking for things I can't agree with. What specifically is Iran asking for that the president can't agree with?
Well, obviously, I'm not able to go beyond what the president was comfortable saying there. But of course, these are ongoing diplomatic conversations. They continue. And remember, the president has been clear, not just over the past year, but over his entire career. Iran is a country that for 47 years has chanted death to America, has threatened our troops, killed Americans overseas. The president isn't going to allow that to happen anymore. So any agreement is going to ensure the long and short-term safety of the American homeland and our troops overseas. But I'll leave it to the president to get into further details.
Tobin, live in Chicago. Mike, thanks. President Trump says he is not happy with Iran and its new offer, and now is considering his options. One of those, he says, is to, quote, blast the hell out of them. This comes as his administration technically states the Iran conflict is over in a letter to Congress. It says the ceasefire that began in early April is still holding. That is seen by many lawmakers as a maneuver designed to avoid the need for congressional approval of the action at 60 days. Senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy has details tonight, live from the North Lawn. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Brett. Yes, on paper, the war with Iran is over. But because President Trump has not decided to pull any Pentagon assets out of the Persian Gulf, it's not really over.
They're asking for things that I can't agree to.
Negotiations with Iran continue. As the White House writes to Congress, the hostilities that began on February 28th, 2026 have terminated. That's key, because if those hostilities ran longer than 60 days in a row, President Trump would need to ask Congress for permission to continue to comply with the War Powers Act.
The war powers. Every other president considered it totally unconstitutional, and we agree with that.
Thousands of missiles and bombs have fallen on Iran during Operation Epic Fury, and Vice President Vance, according to The Atlantic, expressed his concerns about the availability of certain missile systems in discussions with President Trump. The president doesn't share those concerns.
It's all over the world we have inventory, and we could take that if we need it. For instance, we're stocked and locked and loaded.
As a result of the war, gas prices have climbed to $4.39 a gallon.
And people are angry about it. I'm angry about it when I go to the gas pump.
As soon as the war ends, the gasoline prices will go down.
But Trump is right. As soon as we get the Strait open, you'll see that price fall, hopefully down to $3.50.
If the president decides to break the ceasefire, CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper has presented him new strike options.
I mean, do we want to go and just blast the hell out of them and finish him forever, or do we want to try and make a deal? I mean, those are the options.
Do you want to go blast the hell out of them?
I prefer not. On a human basis, I prefer not, but that's the option.
President Trump's words there don't make it sound like another military strike against Iran is imminent, but it is also extremely unlikely that he's going to declare epic fury officially over until Iran says the magic words, no nuclear weapons. Brett.
And Peter, President Trump is pulling out troops from Germany?
Yes, we just got word from the Department of War. They're going to pull 5,000 troops out of Germany. There are 38,000 American troops stationed there right now. It's going to take 6 to 12 months for this to happen. And the Department of War says they're doing this because they just finished a review of the force posture in Europe. But it's also worth pointing out this comes as President Trump has been extremely critical of Germany for their lack of help with the Iran war. He said yesterday, Spain and Italy might soon see American troops leave too. Brett.
Peter Ducey, live on the North Lawn. Peter, thank you. As mentioned, the reaction to Iran's latest peace offer has not been positive. Ashley Webster of Fox Business has details tonight from Tel Aviv.
Iran delivered the text of a new proposal through a mediator in Pakistan. The details have not been revealed, but President Trump says he's not impressed. So far, Tehran has shelved any talks about nuclear weapons, and analysts say negotiations are likely to move slowly.
The hardliners in charge are not about to present to President Trump a deal that he's willing to accept. That's number one. Number two, he's not going to make a bad deal himself.
The blockade continues to keep ships from going in or coming out of any Iranian port, with CENTCOM saying that the U.S. Navy has already turned back now 45 vessels. But Iran remains defiant. Mohammad Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, posted a sharp jab on X, saying, quote, "If you build two walls, one from New York City to the West Coast and another from LA to the East Coast, the total length will be 7,755 kilometers, which is still about 1,000 kilometers short of Iran's total borders. Good luck blockading a country with those borders." There are reports that Tehran is using the ceasefire to excavate weapons hidden underground or that are buried under rubble. With the fragile ceasefire still in place, Iran's proxy Hezbollah continues to target Israeli troops with explosive drones in southern Lebanon. So far this week, one Israeli soldier has been killed, 15 others injured. And Brett, despite the ongoing stalemate, the former ambassador to the United States from Pakistan says, look, they're continuing to exchange proposals, which is a positive sign for diplomacy. We'll see. Brett.
Fox News senior strategic analyst, chairman of the Institute of Study Award, General Jack Keane, joins us now. General, first off, the Supreme Leader not knuckling under, warning us that our Navy's going to end up on the bottom of the sea. What does that do to things?
Well, they're always full of bluster. I mean, the rhetoric is considerably much stronger than what they're able to produce in reality in terms of military terms. I mean, that's what this is. It's for their own domestic population, to show that they're still in charge here. They're standing up to the powers of Israel and the United States, and also, obviously, for international consumption. I mean, the administration sees right through that.
So let's talk about what the president got yesterday, a briefing of options that he could take out if we resume the fighting in Iran, which I think seems to be the path we're on. What could you tell me about those options?
Well, first of all, I mean, where are we right now? So the American people understand. We've been 3+ weeks into an attempt to negotiate after the Iranians shut down the straits. The administration believe that there would be an opportunity here for negotiations. I think the Iranians put some feelers out there that convinced our negotiators that there clearly was some realistic possibilities here. And none of that turned out to be the case, because the hardliners in charge are not about to present to President Trump a deal that he's willing to accept. That's number one. Number two, he's not going to make a bad deal himself. So we have a stalemate here. They own the Straits of Hormuz, and we have shut down all their exports with the blockade. So we could continue that, and because the blockade is definitely effective. And we can make a huge list of everything that's happening to the Iranians in terms of the economic peril and the suffering is about to take place. But you have to, again, recognize who are we really dealing with here. The guys running the regime, all they care about is staying in power. They don't care about their people. They've demonstrated that time and time again in terms of their economic peril that they put them in themselves and also killing them to make certain they stay in power. So they, in their minds, can outlast us in the sense that political pressure, getting closer to the midterms, economic pressure with gas prices on the administration, they believe, even though we have the economic blockade, at some point we will end the war, stop everything, or make a deal with them that meets some of their objectives. The other alternative was to recognize that they are steadfast in that, and they will certainly don't care about their people suffering. The people that think this is going to cause a collapse and they're going to make a deal, I think they're underestimating who these guys really are. So the reality is, then what else are our options? Well, I think option one is return and finish what we started. We spent 3 weeks here trying to work something out with these guys. We have assigned objectives to the CENTCOM, so does Israel. We're 2 weeks short of accomplishing that. Let's go finish that once and for all. Complete that mission that we've given to them. And we can go through a list of targets, but there's leadership targets out there. There's ballistic missiles out there. Right. There's a remnants of the nuclear program that's out there. There's drone storage that's out there, and energy infrastructure, etc. There's plenty of targets that we have assigned that we want to finish. And we have twice the amount of combat power to do that from when we started. And the Israelis are flush with munitions. Also, what do we do about the Straits of Hormuz? We can't leave them in Iranians' hands. They believe now they own it. We have to militarily force that to be cleared and secured and open. And we have the military capability to do that. Another option, what do we do about Carg Island? Carg Island is blocked right now by our blockade. An option when we finish military operations, or maybe even start with military operations, it's an option the president has, certainly, and likely was discussed. We could destroy it. And that would force an eventual economic collapse of the regime. There's no doubt about that. They don't have much alternatives, right, because literally 80% of their revenue comes from that distribution of oil itself right out of that one place. So those military options went through discussions last week, and the president has those decisions to make. I do think we'll probably move on and do something here other than the blockade, because the blockade in of itself, I don't believe is going to force any concessions out of these people, given who they really are.
So, yeah, I mean, as great as Treasury's done and as good as we've done with the blockade, it's not going to work because of the type of people we're dealing with. Israel's defense minister came out and essentially said talks are going nowhere and suggested they might go back to warfare because they cannot allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon or the ballistic missile program. That's not brought up enough. So that, the president's briefing, the fact that they evidently are rearming massively as Israel, along with interceptors. Could you also, General, tell me about the new hypersonic weapon that's going to be in theater for the first time that evidently arrived, called the Dark Eagle, that'll allow us to do what if we use it?
Well, it's a weapon that the Iranians don't have the capability to defeat. So we can use it at will, obviously at range, and obviously it's very lethal. So it's the most sophisticated missile we have on the battlefield. And yes, we are employing that. When it comes to the Israelis, so our audience understands, there's a ceasefire in name only. Hezbollah has violated the ceasefire almost 50 times, firing into northern Israel with rockets and missiles and mortars. And the Israelis according to the terms of the ceasefire, have the right to defend against that. So they're conducting military operations. I think we got to recognize it for what it is. We got to let the Israelis finish Hezbollah for sure in southern Lebanon once and for all, and take the leaders down wherever they are in Lebanon. We just got to get to their end state in achieving that.
Right.
The ceasefire is not curbing Hezbollah's behavior at all.
And by the way, the friction within the Iranian government is on full display. It's so obvious. It's almost impossible to cut a deal with people that can't even understand what their criteria is for a deal. General Jack Keane will continue to watch, read the Institute Study of War, which you founded. Thanks so much.
Yeah, great talking to you. Have a wonderful weekend.
President Trump with a lot to say about negotiations with Iran on his way out of the White House. Part of the problem, he doesn't know who he's supposed to be negotiating with.
Right now, we have negotiations going on. They're not getting there. They are very disjointed. They're extremely disjointed. They're not able to get along with each other as leaders. They don't know who the leader is. Their military has been defeated. If we left right now, it would take them 20 years to build back that country. But we're not satisfied at this moment.
Let's bring in retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General John Teichert for more on this. General, always great to see you. Thanks for being with us today. So the president seems happy enough to let Iran sweat out this blockade. This is what else he said.
They want to make a deal badly. And we have a problem because nobody knows for sure who the leaders are. It's a little bit of a problem. You know, the leaders have been wiped out along with their military, almost all of their military.
But General Jack Keane said that he doesn't know that this blockade in and of itself is going to work. What do you think?
John, I think we're in a race against the clock right now, whether the pressure of the blockade is enough to change the strategic calculus of the Iranian regime first, or whether the domestic international pressure is stronger on President Trump. But I agree with General Keane that I think there's one thing that can accelerate the clock in our favor, and that is limited strategic strikes on areas that would be significant to the regime that can accelerate that clock in our favor.
What would those be?
I think regime targets and those regime energy targets like Karg Island that fund the regime, I think that fundamentally changes the ability of the regime to stay in power and remain in power and would get their attention to our benefit.
General Sandra here in New York, thanks so much for joining us. Here was another exchange with Peter Doocy and President Trump as Trump was departing the White House a few moments ago on blasting the hell out of Iran. Listen to what he said.
I mean, do we want to go and just blast the hell out of them and finish him forever, or do we want to try and make a deal? I mean, those are the options.
Do you want to go blast the hell out of them?
I prefer not. On a human basis, I prefer not, but that's the option.
I prefer not, said the president. On a human basis, I prefer not. That's an option, though. What did you think of his response there?
Sandra, I think that he's keeping his options open. And I think that combination of the economic pressure of the blockade and the possibility, if not the reality, of striking those targets that would get the attention of the regime, I think that mix of factors could be the winning combination to bring them to the table.
I mean, when you talk about this idea of blasting the hell out of them, you can blast the hell out of their military infrastructure, but you get to a point, General, where there's not much military infrastructure left to go, that they still do have a lot of drones and ballistic missiles. Then you got to go after regime targets. But as long as they have all the weapons and the Iranian citizenry does not have the weapons, they're going to maintain power. Does the president have to try to create the conditions for people to be able to take to the streets again, as they did in January, not get slaughtered, and potentially effect an overthrow?
John, I think there's two avenues for it here. Either there's regime change that we could facilitate with more focused targeting of the regime, or something that I call regime enlightenment, which is making it painful enough for the regime or help them to realize that their future is not likely to remain the regime if we start striking those energy or economic targets that may change their calculus. And I think focusing our military strikes, if we start them on those two types of target sets, would change their mind potentially and help nudge us forward to a deal that would be favorable to us.
You know, I think people are heading into another weekend here, General, and they're just wondering, what is this timeline starting to look like to you?
Sandra, I think the challenge is, when is it significantly painful enough for the regime that either they don't believe they can remain in power now, or they don't have the avenues to remain in power in the future because we've strangled their finances. And hopefully sooner rather than later, with a combination of a good sound blockade and limited but strategic strikes, that we can accelerate that timeline again to our benefit.
Well, you know, they are nothing if not stubborn, so we'll see what lies ahead. General, always good to be with you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
The future of the Live Golf Tour is in jeopardy tonight. We first broke this story on Special Report more than 2 weeks ago. The Saudi fund that has poured billions of dollars into the effort says it will end its contribution after this current season. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott has details tonight from London.
It's official. Saudi Arabia saying it's ending its funding for sporting upstart Live Golf. Saudi's Public Investment Fund, or PIF, has pumped billions into the nearly 4-year-old league, aiming to rival the more established PGA Tour, luring away big-name golfers with mega salaries. After losing hundreds of millions, as reported by Brett Baer in mid-April, the fund says it's reorienting where it puts its money, as it also deals with economic fallout from the conflict in Iran, saying in a statement, the substantial investment required by Live Golf over a longer term is no longer consistent with the current phase of PIF's investment strategy. Live Golf, which even critics say has brought the game to new places while upping players' earnings, put its spin on a new funding drive, saying it wants to engage in constructive, forward-looking discussions with prospective global investors and partners who share its vision for an inclusive and modernized game. But without Saudi cash, experts doubt the tour can hold on to stars like Jon Rahm and Bryson DeChambeau.
The answer would be, I don't believe so, that anybody would come in and invest this kind of money.
Players Brooks Koepka and Patrick Reed left Live and are heading back to the PGA months before today's news. Others now reportedly trying. The renowned tour not making it easy. President Trump has supported Live Golf, the fund backing it chaired by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Trump hosted Live tournaments at his golf clubs, including one upcoming at his D.C. area course. When asked about the news today, the president offered this.
I'd love to see Live, but I do believe that all of the golfers should be playing, the great golfers should be playing against each other.
We also asked sportscaster Gray what all this disruption has meant to the sport of golf. He replied, the game is strong. The game will survive. This too shall pass. Brett.
Greg Palcott in London. Greg, thanks.
In terms of the negotiation telephonically, they've made strides, but I'm not sure if they ever get there.
President Trump earlier talking about negotiations with Iran as Israel is threatening to resume strikes on Iran if the conflict resumes. Let's bring in Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States. Mr. Ambassador, always good to spend time with you. Thank you for joining us this Friday afternoon. So in terms of any renewed strikes on Iran, I assume that Israel would either need approval or the participation of the United States. What are you hearing in that regard?
Good to hear. Good to be with you, John. As always, I think it's just the other way around. The IDF is now on high alert tonight. The Israeli Defense Forces waiting the word from President Trump to see whether President Trump will renew the hostilities against Iran. I don't think Israel's going to be the first to pull the trigger here. And even if it were, you're right. Israel wouldn't do it without very close cooperation and a very bright green light from the White House. But as far as we in Israel understand it, we're waiting on the word from the White House.
So what's your thoughts on if hostilities were to resume, what targets would be gone after?
Well, I think at this time that they would target the energy sources, the power plants, the oil refinery centers, what wasn't targeted last time on Karg Island, and great emphasis put on opening up the Iranian blockade of the Hormuz Straits. That is knocking out the shore batteries. There are apparently hundreds, if not more, of these light craft that belong to the IRGC. The United States was very successful in sinking the Iranian Navy, its official Navy, but there's an unofficial Navy of small craft that can carry explosives. They can do like suicide boats. And if you've got 50 of those coming out an aircraft carrier, it's going to be a challenge. So I think that's the opportunity to strike along the coast of the Strait of Hormuz and open it up.
Although the United States Navy does have a lot of expertise and experience in taking out small boats that are traveling fast on the open ocean. The president seems to be banking, at least for the moment, that this blockade is going to squeeze Iran to the point where it will capitulate. Here's what the Wall Street Journal wrote about it. A growing camp of hardliners believe Iran has to take the military initiative and start a shooting war again to send oil prices soaring higher and increase the pressure on Trump. They argue that the blockade goes beyond the sanctions that Iran has faced down in the past and amounts to an act of war that must have a military response. So according to the Wall Street Journal, it might be the Iranians that start shooting first.
Well, I read that this morning, and I thought to myself, Dirty Harry. And we're of an age, right, John? You remember the Dirty Harry movies? Go ahead, pull the trigger. Pull the trigger, make my day.
Yep.
And nobody can complain to Israel or the United States if Iran starts firing at us once again. And we take countermeasures. And those countermeasures just happen to knock out what remains of Iran's oil industry and energy producing sites. So again, Dirty Harry, make my day.
Yeah, well, and Dirty Harry asked, I know what you're saying to yourself. Did he fire 5 bullets or 6? You want to try? So Iran appears to be weighing its options in terms of military action. Here's what the Wall Street Journal wrote. Iranian officials said Tehran could use previously unused weapons to attack U.S. warships, from submarines to mine-carrying dolphins. I don't know that they have any submarines, though. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has threatened to step up escalation by cutting phone cables in the Strait of Hormuz, which would disrupt internet traffic globally. I'm not sure what runs across the Strait of Hormuz that would connect the global internet, but I mean, when you take a look at that, it sounds like Iran is thinking about what do they do if they start hostilities again. And it may not be good.
But soon they're not going to go darkly into that night. They like that quietly into that dark night. For them, this is an existential battle.
Oh, thank you, Doc.
It's an existential battle politically for the president, for the Republican Party, and if they may lose those midterm elections. But if the Iranian regime loses the war, they're going to lose their lives. The families of the 30,000 Iranians that they massacred back in January, they're going to come after them. So for them, they're going to pull out any stop they have, any type of out-of-the-box military action they're going to throw at the United States and throw at Israel. We have to be ready for it, and we have to redouble our retaliation against these steps and make it just completely punishing for the Iranian regime. So in addition to the economic pressure, which is extremely painful for them, they're losing between $300 and $500 million a day in oil income through the blockade of the Straits. And the economy was on the verge of collapse before the war. And the rial, the Iranian currency, is worth nothing, literally worth nothing. This may just bring this regime to the negotiation table in a realistic way to meet the demands of President Trump and of Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Well, that would be a good thing for the end of the war and for the economy, but I'm not sure how good that would be for the Iranian people in the long run. Michael
That's
Lawrence.
the sad part, certainly.
Yeah, always great to spend time with you, sir. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Sandra?
All right. I want to bring in former CENTCOM spokesman Joe Pacino. And Joe, welcome to our program here. It's good to have you on here.
Hi, Joe.
A couple of things here. The blockade's doing its job by the U.S. Navy. That economy in Iran is getting battered. It seems the IRGC is in charge. If you agree with all three of those things, what now, Joe?
Well, I think we resume, Bill, the military destruction here. I think what you've got is you're laying two measures of pressure on top of each other. You got the military pressure, and then on top of that, you got the economic destruction really here imposed by the blockade. The military component of this has in many ways already been won, but we can continue the strikes on infrastructure, on bridges, on oil facilities, on command and control nodes, continue those strikes, and then really just behind that, continue the economic stranglehold we've got on top of Iran. And all those pressures, the idea is that we'll bring them back to a negotiation that we can live with.
General Jack Keane was on our show, on Fox and Friends this morning. It's a little bit of a different point of view. Watch here.
I think option one is return and finish what we started. We can go through a list of targets, but there's leadership targets out there. There's ballistic missiles out there. There's the remnants of the nuclear program that's out there. Also, what do we do about the Straits of Hormuz? We can't leave them in Iranians' hands. They believe now they own it. We have to militarily force that to be cleared and secured and open. And we have the military capability to do that.
So obviously, President Trump's been given all of these options as commander-in-chief. You can look across. Do you think it's just more, from your point of view, do you think it's more prudent to wait, see how the economic blockade continues to hurt them, especially if they have to change over and stop pumping oil?
I do not, Dana. I think we should start the military campaign here in the next, 48 to 96 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, and then just continue to really put that military pressure, that military destruction, continue to hit the IRGC facilities, the drone production facilities. We've taken out so much of their military, and I think I would just, consider continuing to attrit the military production, the military facilities there, the command and control. We've now got hypersonic missiles in the region. We have twice the amount of capability in the region, almost twice the amount from when we started this campaign, February 28th. I think if we layer both of these things on at the same time, military pressure, economic destruction at the same time, I think the various, there's three kind of factions inside of Iran that are considering this. I think that leads to diplomatic pressure, which could lead to a negotiation that we can live with, that Israel can live with, and that the Gulf states can live with, frankly.
A great story this morning in the Wall Street Journal talking about the split within the country of Iran. Like the politicians want to cut a deal, but the hardliners do not. With regard to the politicians, the president said this on X on Thursday, said the world has witnessed Iran's tolerance and conciliation. What's being done under the guise of a naval blockade is an extension of military operations against the nation paying the price for its resistance and independence. Continuation of this oppressive approach is intolerable. How do you see Iran viewing its position as leverage? What are they watching here in our country, Joe?
So really quick, Bill, they're watching the polls, they're watching the gas prices, they're watching the political cycle. And what's clear from watching the White House is that President Trump is not going to feel pressured by the gas prices, by the polls, by the political cycle. And that gives him all of the leverage, because at a certain point, Iran is this economic destruction is just going to crush Iran and crush their ability to fund the war and crush their ability to pay the IRGC. And that will potentially turn to a disloyalty moment with the IRGC.
All right, Joe Bacino, it's great to have you. There's so many things that the president has to decide, and we appreciate your analysis this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
With that, we bring in retired Vice Admiral Robert Harward. He is former Deputy Commander of U.S. Central Command and a fellow at the Jewish Institute for National Security. Admiral Harward grew up in Iran and went to school in Tehran as a young man. Admiral, very good to have you with us. Thank you for joining me today. You hear the president's frustration that he's not able to get to an agreement with the leadership. And then you hear Ghalibaf, the head of the parliament in Iran, sort of, teasing and saying, we're so much bigger than you are. You can't blockade Iran. So it seems the president believes that this blockade and the economic battle can ultimately bring Iran to its knees without further military strikes. Do you agree with that?
Well, it depends on how it affects internally. But yes, it's a sound strategy, and they're going to pay a very painful price for this. The issue is how long it will take. Now, Ghalibaf had a good point. It is a vast country, but the topography only allows really central points from the flow stuff in and out of the country. From the north through Tabriz, through the west through Turkey, Pakistan. So we can control those flow points by striking them. We control the air. So I think the president still has so many of these options that he can be patient and let the economic blockade of the oil go on itself, or he can go after some of these supply lines. He can deny all the airspace. You saw the prime minister fly to Pakistan, fly to Russia. We could deny them flying. Any airplane in the air could be a target. So there are a lot of things the president still can and will do if he doesn't see results here. And I would add, I think this is beyond negotiations. It's purely concessions. Agree to dismantling the nuclear program, and there may be negotiations on how you do that, but that's gone. And then the free flow of commerce, that's indisputable. That's what he wants. And the longer they cease meeting those objectives, the more they'll suffer.
So what is your reaction, understanding the country as well as you do, when the president talks about this frustration that you've got these social media posts from Araghchi, the foreign minister, and Ghalibaf, and then you have the head of the IRGC, who doesn't seem to be particularly interested in any sort of negotiation and says, look, there's no way we're giving up our nuclear program. It's not going to happen.
Tell me anything that's different from the last 30 years.
Yeah, exactly.
They've been all same negotiation. It's just rhetoric and nothing more. And I think the real issue is the Iranian people who are suffering. There's going to be a tipping point where they can't get water, they're not getting paid, and that they are going to have to come to the streets regardless of of the other actions. And that's where some of the president's options may have the most impact, how he can support the people of Iran. And he's been very clear in communicating that and meeting those objectives. So I'm sure those are some of the options they discussed with the chairman, the CENTCOM commander, and so we'll see how that plays out. But as you watch the stock market and all the other, time is on the president's hands.
So do you think that there is any real future of these negotiations with this leadership? I mean, it seems to me we're back at square one in terms of being stuck with this same mullah leadership that, you know, has never really changed their opinions about how they see things. And you talk about the people in Iran who clearly want to have totally different leadership. They want to go back to the freedoms that they knew pre-1979. Is there hope for that still?
In my opinion, it's inevitable. It's just how we get there, how much destruction, how much pain the Iranian people can go through. And this regime knows that. If they relinquish those elements of power, they're doomed. So in my humble opinion, it's inevitable either way. We just have to stay the course. And I would tell you, everyone in the region is cheering for the president to stay the course. And so I believe he will, regardless of all the political rhetoric going on right now.
Yeah, he seems determined to finish the job. It's just a question of which way it's going to happen and whether or not another layer of leadership needs to go for those catalysts to begin to move is one of the decisions that's on the president's plate right now. He clearly wants progress. He's not a patient man, and he wants to see this, the wheels turning here to get to the end of this situation in a much better place for the Iranian people as well. Admiral, always great to see you, sir. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Good to be with you.
One of the country's top oil executives telling Fox today it is moving to keep supplies high as the U.S. carries out a blockade of Iranian ports in the Strait of Hormuz.
The U.S. is helping meet the moment, not only here at home, where supplies are ample and the concerns about shortages really do not exist, absent maybe California, and we are helping meet the demands of the world. And so I think the U.S. energy industry is standing tall during this moment of need.
Fox Business correspondent Lauren Simonetti has been tracking all of this for us live from New York City. Lauren?
Hi, Sandra. Good to see you. Well, Chevron CEO Mike Wirth also said the U.S. is not only the biggest producer, but also the biggest exporter of oil and gas. 72% of our LNG exports, they're going to Europe right now. And Sandra, I want you to look at that. This is the armada of empty VLCCs. Those are the big ships that hold 2 million barrels of oil each. They're making their way to the Gulf Coast to fill up with American oil. This week, the U.S., for the first time since World War II, became a net exporter of crude oil for the first time. The world needs our oil as the Navy's blockade of Iran's ports in the Strait of Hormuz continues. Let's take a look at some dark fleet ships and tankers that are docked this morning at the port of Chabahar in Iran. They can't get into the strait. That's why they're stuck there. They can't fill up with or sell Iranian oil. The standstill has U.S. drivers paying $4.39 to fill up the gas tank today. The worry is if there's no movement at the strait and the U.S. continues to draw down our own inventories, gas could hit $5 this month.
By the time we get to Memorial Day, we'll hit $5 a gallon of gasoline. And if the conflict continues through the remainder of the summer and we still don't have resupply from the Middle East Gulf, then we'll continue to see prices continue to rise through the summer.
President Trump acknowledging the possibility.
Gasoline's high, but when this is over, you'll have a world without a nuclear weapon with Iran. If you allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon, the world would be in great jeopardy. So it's not going to happen. As soon as the war ends, the gasoline prices will fall.
He says they will fall like a rock. One more thing, Venezuela. Since the U.S. got involved there, their oil exports are at a 7-year high, a reported 1.23 million barrels a day, Sandra. So everything is shifting really fast, and it's coming to the West, specifically the U.S.
Really fascinating to watch. Lauren, thank you. Sure. Good to see you. All right.
Iran is dying to make a deal. I can only tell you that. I don't want to get into it, but they cannot be nuclear other than that. But their Navy's gone, their Air Force is gone. Every ounce of any form of equipment practically is gone, and they want to make a deal.
So President Trump is pushing hard on Iran to make a deal, and he's keeping one red line very clear, that it cannot have a nuclear weapon, full stop. Meantime, the U.S. blockade continues to crush Iran's economy. The regime is running out of space to store the oil it cannot sell. The head of Central Command was at the White House yesterday briefing the president and other leaders there. Senator Lindsey Graham says this is really no time at all to let up the pressure.
It's not about how long it goes on. It's about how it ends. If you want perpetually high gas prices and a world in chaos, let Iran get back in the game. Let them survive with their nuclear ambitions intact. That's unacceptable. To my Democratic colleagues, I've pretty much had it with the idea that Iran is not a threat to the world.
And all of this coming to a head as today marks the 60-day deadline for Congress to reauthorize Operation Epic Fury. Our Alexandria Huff is at the White House with the latest. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Aisha. Yeah, the administration is arguing that this deadline is not a deadline because the clock should not have continued running. Explaining this to Fox, quote, the hostilities that began on February 28th have terminated and a ceasefire has been agreed to, adding to us that there has been no exchange of fire involving U.S. armed forces since April 7th. Therefore, this reauthorization isn't due or needed. Continuing with this statement, the administration is in active conversations with the Hill on this topic. Members of Congress who try to score political points by usurping the commander-in-chief's authority would only undermine the United States military abroad, which no elected official should want to do. At the same time, Iran's Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei reportedly remains in poor health, still reeling from earlier airstrike injuries. He vowed yesterday that Iran would protect its nuclear capabilities and said the only place for the American military in the Persian Gulf is at the bottom of its waters. Without a deal, the administration says Iran's fragile oil storage system is going to soon reach capacity and push Iran deeper into economic crisis, costing it an additional $170 million a day in lost revenue.
If you look at the stress, I'm talking as an economist, if you look at the economic stress that the Iranian people are under right now, that it should be unacceptable to any civilized leader.
Now, Iran faces potential permanent damage to its oil infrastructure. President Trump does acknowledge that Americans are feeling pressure at the pump.
The gas will go down. As soon as the war's over, it'll drop like a rock. There's so much of it. It's all over the place, sitting all over the oceans of the world. And it'll go down.
The national average, though, today, Aisha, $4.39 a gallon. Send it back to you.
Okay, Alex Hoff, live for us. Thank you very much. Let's bring in Victoria Coates. She served as Deputy National Security Advisor during President Trump's first term. She's also Vice President of National Security for the Heritage Foundation. Victoria, great to have you. So the CENTCOM commander visits the White House and sort of lays out the options for the president should he decide to resume military strikes. What's your read on the situation right now? Do you think that the president will do that, and how quickly?
Well, Aisha, great to be with you. I think that both Admiral Cooper and General Kane, gave the president a range of options. People are talking about a military operation to clear the strait. That may eventually become necessary. Some other targeted bombing of infrastructure that the president has discussed. But really what the second front of this war is the economic front, Operation Economic Fury, which is what Secretary Bessent has been talking about, and the just utter decimation of the Iranian economy. And so I think it's the reality of what they're facing, what they've done to themselves over the last 2 months set in. We'll see if they're going to start to make some meaningful concessions on the nuclear program. And that's when we will know that the situation is up for them, because they've always held their nuclear program as their get out of jail free card. It's the last thing they will sacrifice. But if they're in that extreme state, then I think the president's going to have a ton of leverage.
Well, let's put the numbers on the screen. You're talking about this economic warfare, and Iran is getting hit hard. I mean, the country is losing a whopping $435 million a day in economic activity, and that includes nearly $140 million a day in lost oil revenue. The cost of living is soaring in that country, food inflation exceeding 112%. I mean, these numbers are nuts. And Iran's currency Victoria, just collapsed to 1.8 million reals to just $1. The Wall Street Journal, with this headline here, Iran is grasping for a solution to an American blockade it cannot break. Quote, for almost 5 decades, Iran's Islamic government has survived financial pressure from the U.S. by selling oil to China. It confronted American military might with guerrilla tactics, but with the U.S. Navy's blockade, that strategy might have met its match, analysts said. But, you know, even with this blockade hurting them, we see the numbers, it's hurting them. Jack Keane said earlier today that the Iranians believe they can outlast us. They're watching what this is, how this is politically affecting the president here at home, what's happening with gas prices, and they think they can dig in and let it go for a while. They don't care about their people.
No, they absolutely don't. And that's a very important point. But, you know, maybe they're reading the New York Times and getting their fake news, if you will, from there, and they're believing their own propaganda. But the economic reality won't lie. I mean, that real, that currency has lost 98% of its value over the last 10 years. They've shut down their stock market for 2 months. But the really interesting statistic, Aisha, and where I think the rubber's going to hit the road here is unemployment. They've lost 1 million jobs. And because of the destruction of the steel industry, the carpet industry, the oil industry, they have 10 million jobs at risk. That starts to look like 50% unemployment. That's when they can't go on. And so the regime can take as much pain as it wants at that point. But normal Iranians, I mean, their lives are going to cease to function. That's what happened in December and January. And I think we would be much better prepared to support them now. And the regime will be in a much weaker position if that does come to pass.
Victoria, very quickly, with just 15 seconds left here, the president says he might pull out troops from countries that are not helping European countries like Spain, Germany, Italy. Do you think he goes through with that?
Oh, we've long advocated for this. These are World War II deployments. I want to look at New Europe. I want to look at Poland, Romania, the Baltic states, our new Nordic friends in NATO. We should be going east and north where the threat is to deploy our troops in Europe.
Okay. Victoria Coates, thank you so much for coming on. Great to see you.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me.
Okay, you guys, did you like that? Give me a second. Something I wanted to show you. I don't know if I have it here. No. Oh, I don't know what happened to it. Okay, I have something else for you then. Let me take you here. I hope you like this, okay? Doc, okay, we'll see about us being friends after this. All right, you guys, I hope you like this. I wanted to share this with you, but all right.
The United States military began major combat operations in Iran.
The Israeli army and the state of Israel set out to thwart existential threats to Israel and great threats to America and the entire world.
It was the second time in less than a year that Israel and the U.S. had attacked Iran.
This combined force of more than 400 fighter jets, 2 aircraft carriers, all these destroyers, refueling capability, they'd never seen anything like this before.
Explosions rocked multiple cities.
The Pentagon saying U.S. airstrikes have destroyed hundreds of Iran's ballistic missiles, launchers, and drones.
Within 24 hours, Iran's supreme leader and other top officials had been killed.
His removal obviously creates a massive power vacuum.
Earth-shattering moment for the Middle East.
As the conflict spreads,
We're seeing the Middle East absorb a wave of Iranian retaliation.
There is now a second front that has opened up in Lebanon.
an updated presentation of the long road to war.
We're ready to roll.
Drawing on interviews with officials, insiders, and experts on all sides.
This film's going to cover a large swath of history.
Correspondent James Jacoby traces the roots of the conflict.
You've just come out of the bomb shelter?
Yes, just out of the shelter, yes.
From the rise of Iran's regional proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas.
It was a huge threat.
To the diplomatic efforts to contain Iran's nuclear program.
The leaders of Iran must recognize that now's the time for a diplomatic solution.
The October 7th attacks.
There's an Israel before October 7th, and there is an Israel after October 7th.
To the fighting in its wake.
We will not allow those threats to come to our borders.
Annihilation, extermination. Do I need to give you numbers?
We faced an aggression by Israel and by America, and then we resisted.
Leading up to the current war.
Dozens of young girls were killed in airstrikes that hit an elementary school.
The U.S. and Israel pummeling Iranian missile bases.
And uncertainty gripping the region.
Intensifying military conflict, which has spiraled into a full-blown regional war.
The old order is broken. The new order is emergent.
Now on Frontline.
We've unleashed all kinds of forces that we cannot control.
Remaking the Middle East. The U.S., Israel, and Iran.
This program contains graphic imagery. Viewer discretion is advised.
When I last stood here, I spoke of the consequences of Iran developing nuclear weapons. Now, time is running out. The more Iran believes that all options are on the table, the less the chance of confrontation.
The roots of the war with Iran go back many years, to a long campaign by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
And this is why I ask you to continue to send an unequivocal message that America will never permit Iran to develop nuclear weapons.
I don't think I had a single meeting with the prime minister where he didn't raise his concerns about Iran. And certainly the fact that Iran was pursuing a nuclear program that might enable it to have a nuclear weapon. He was single-mindedly focused on that, and he would never let me forget it, that was his number one priority.
What was often your response to that?
My response was that the United States largely shared that analysis and that understanding of the Iranian regime. The only question was, how would we deal with it? How would we deal with the most significant and most dangerous threat that Iran could pose, which is if it ever acquired a nuclear weapon, and how to make sure that didn't happen.
Netanyahu had reason to be concerned. Western intelligence services had recently uncovered a dangerous new phase in Iran's nuclear ambitions.
Western leaders in Pittsburgh this week were unhappy, but they weren't surprised.
President Obama and the leaders of France and the United Kingdom revealed what intelligence
your program.
There were a number of clocks ticking. One clock was the rate at which Iran was enriching uranium. Another clock, the rate in which it would complete enriching to move on the ground, which is going to be too late.
Iran building a bomb, and Fordo was for its civilian nuclear power program.
Never Iran was after nuclear bomb.
Hussavian spent years as an Iranian diplomat and nuclear negotiator. Why would Iran build a nuclear facility in the side of a mountain 80 meters underground if it were only for peaceful purposes? Why do that?
The answer is very, very simple. It is because of the U.S., because every U.S. president repeatedly said all options are on the table.
Is my sound messing up,
It means
guys?
the U.S. may attack Iran. When you threaten a country for military strike, why they should not have their nuclear facilities under the ground?
Can you hear it or no?
They would be crazy if they would not have done it.
Good morning, Jonathan.
Tough new sanctions are designed to slow Iran's nuclear ambitions. President Obama is expected to sign those penalties into law.
Sounds good. Thank you,
Pleased to
Jonathan.
sign into law the toughest sanctions against Iran ever passed by the United States Congress.
The Obama administration had already imposed crippling sanctions on Iran, and behind the scenes pursued a series of covert cyber operations against its nuclear program.
You know, for them, you're the great Satan, we're the little Satan. For them, we are you and you are us.
But Netanyahu wanted to go further, a military strike.
The prime minister did not believe the Iranian nuclear program could be contained and prevented from producing a nuclear weapon without military action. So for him, it was a matter of when and who and how.
There is strong likelihood Israel will strike Iran in April, May, or June.
In early 2012, the Israeli military was planning for an attack on Iran's nuclear sites. But as the possibility of a strike grew, Netanyahu's own cabinet and intelligence agencies were divided on whether to attack.
The issue was whether right now they're building a bomb and this is the right time to do it.
Zohar Palti, head of Mossad's intelligence directorate, was arguing against it.
You are not coming and starting a war with a huge state like Iran without those discussions. And if somebody is pushing you as a professional, I want to do it, I said, okay, but you have to understand, right now, at that moment, the Iranians are not building a bomb.
The head of the Mossad was against it, the chief of staff was against it. And around the table from the professionals, I think that I was the only one who thought that this is the right moment and we should do it.
Yaakov Amadror was Netanyahu's national security advisor.
We are asking ourselves every morning one question. Will tomorrow be too late? If it is not, we don't do anything. If it is, the answer is yes, tomorrow will be too late. We have to decide what we do.
With his cabinet divided, Netanyahu turned to Obama and asked him for assurance that if Israel did go ahead, the U.S. would back them up.
What Netanyahu wants is either a green light or a yellow light to go bomb the Iranian program. And the knowledge that if the Iranians retaliated against Israel, Obama would be right with him to get into that conflict. And Obama wasn't going to give him that. He couldn't imagine how you bomb Iran without triggering a general war in the Middle East.
In the end, Netanyahu stood down. The animosity between Iran and Israel goes back almost 50 years to 1979, when Iranian revolutionaries overthrew a repressive monarchy supported by the U.S. and allied with Israel.
Ayatollah Khomeini, who was the chief ideologue of the Iranian Revolution, had written a lot about Israel in his proclamations, in his writings. He saw Israel as an aggressive outside force which had taken Palestinian territory, exiled Palestinians from their land.
And was part of this actually enshrined in the revolutionary Iranian stance on Israel?
Yes, he was part of the ideology. Eradication of Israel, restoration of land to the Palestinians was an aspiration of all Arabs, all Muslims at that point in time, and it would be the Islamic Revolution that would fulfill that aspiration.
The new Iranian regime was heavily sanctioned by the U.S., which backed Iran's rivals in the region, like Iraq and Saudi Arabia.
Iran is Shia, Iran is Persian-speaking, the Arab world's consciousness is Sunni, it's Arabic-speaking. Iran in the region is an absolute loner.
Iran would bolster its standing in the region through its support of the Palestinian cause.
No other issue gives Iran a role, a say in the Arab world, right? No other issue speaks to Arab hearts and minds than Iran's support for the Palestinians.
The devastation in the west of the city is appalling.
Initially, Iran backed Yasser Arafat's Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO. which was engaged in an armed struggle against Israel from its base in Lebanon. In 1982, Israel invaded and occupied southern Lebanon to drive out the PLO. Iran went on to train and fund a Lebanese Shia group to fight against Israel. It would become known as Hezbollah, Arabic for the Party of God.
120 Americans killed today.
Soon after, a massive suicide bombing at a U.S. Marine barracks in Beirut would be widely attributed to Hezbollah, acting as a proxy for Iran.
It left really, really bitter taste in American mouths. It really hardened America's views on Iran.
These deeds make so evident the bestial nature of those who would assume power if they could have their way and drive us out of that area.
But it also taught the Iranians that there was a strategy here, that you could actually extricate the West by using, call it terrorism, call it asymmetric behavior, etc.
A huge explosion, apparently caused by a bomb, shattered the Israeli embassy in Arch.
Then Hezbollah units, or those militias Iran was training, started suicide bombing against Israeli targets.
We shall look for the people who are responsible for this terrible crime.
By the 1990s, Israeli intelligence was growing increasingly concerned that Iran was escalating and trying to develop a nuclear bomb, a red line for Israel, the only nuclear power in the Middle East.
There's already very deep animosity between Iran and Israel, and it's a very ideological animosity from Iran's perspective. So if we do the 1 + 1 + 1, we understand that there is a nuclear weapon being developed to be put on a missile that is probably destined to end up in Israel.
Netanyahu began calling for international action against Iran.
The most dangerous of these regimes is Iran. If this regime or its despotic neighbor Iraq were to acquire nuclear weapons, this could presage catastrophic consequences, not only for my country and not only for the Middle East, but for all of mankind.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has been after bombing Iran from early 1990s. He doesn't care about enrichment or nuclear bomb or even nuclear program. He just wants to drag the US in a war with Iran. That's it.
Throughout this time, Iran's proxy strategy was evolving.
Today, we are preparing a whole new generation which will fight the state of Israel in the future.
With Arafat and the PLO negotiating the historic Oslo peace accords with Israel, Iran began backing a new, more extreme Palestinian group, Hamas.
The car bomb was aimed at killing the maximum number of Israeli schoolchildren. Militants belonging to the Islamic group Hamas said they carried out the attack.
When the Oslo Agreement is signed, most Palestinians said, let's give this a chance. But there was that core constituency among Palestinians who said, the peace process is a sham, it can never succeed, only armed struggle can liberate Palestine, and Hamas became the embodiment of that sentiment.
Hamas's founding declaration called for the destruction of Israel, and it violently opposed a two-state solution.
In these decades of the 1990s, there's only one country, and since then, effectively, there has been only one country that continues to arm militias against Israel, that continues to not accept the two-state solution, and that is the Islamic Republic of Iran.
In 2003, after the US invasion of Iraq, Iran seized the chance to expand its regional influence even farther.
This starts supporting, arming, funding, and in fact cultivating militias and political groups in countries around the region, and it defines that as part of what becomes known in the security lingo of Iran as forward defense. The idea is that we will fight in Lebanon, we will fight in Syria, we will fight in Palestine. so that we don't have to fight in Iran.
In time, this network of militias would become known as the Axis of Resistance, from the Houthis opposing Saudi influence in Yemen to Shia fighters in Iraq. The Iranian government denies the groups act as proxies, insisting they are independent organizations, all fighting against Israel, which to this day it says is an illegitimate state occupying Palestinian land.
We have supported, the Palestinian people in their struggle to end the occupation in Palestine.
Majid Takhtravanchi is Iran's deputy foreign minister. Iran has supported, with both training and military support and money, certain regional actors. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. The Israelis and the Americans describe this strategy as building an axis of resistance. They see it as an offensive strategy.
The axis of resistance, you mentioned the axis of resistance. Axis of resistance against whom? Against the occupation. The Israelis and the Americans have been, floating this idea that the axis of resistance is against America or against Israel. They do not say the fact that the axis of resistance was in response to occupation, in response to more than 70 years of Israeli occupation of Palestine. If they want to see an end to resistance, they should end the occupation, pure and simple.
The Iranian objective, and it was not only propaganda, was to remove the great Satan, which is the United States, from the Middle East, and to wipe Israel off the map. So death to America, death to Israel.
Amos Yadlin was the head of Israeli military intelligence in the years the proxy network was expanding.
And basically, as chief of intelligence, I saw three main efforts. One is the proxy, supporting Hezbollah, supporting the Palestinian terrorists, the Houthis, the Assad regime, the Shia militia in Iraq. Second, ballistic missiles. And then the nuclear.
Now, the professor was killed by a remote-controlled bomb.
Israel began engaging in a shadow war of its own.
Two of Iran's top nuclear scientists were targeted by hit squads
against Iran's nuclear program.
Two men on a motorcycle stuck a magnetic bomb to the door, then detonated it as they pulled away.
If there is someone who is very important in the process, and without him it will be delayed for a while, he will be eliminated.
Cyber attacks, assassinations.
Cyber attacks, assassinations, blowing some tools inside the system, agents which are going in and putting explosives here and there. It was understood it cannot destroy but it can delay it. And when you buy time in the Middle East, you buy everything.
The leaders of Iran must recognize that now's the time for a diplomatic solution, because a coalition stands united in demanding that they meet their obligations, and we will do what is necessary to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon.
By 2013, having refused to support an Israeli military strike on Iran the year before, President Obama was now pursuing his own strategy. He wanted to negotiate.
When we set up the early stages of the negotiations, it was very secret. It was a very small group. I was chief of staff to the president at the time. There were half a dozen people who knew that the conversation was going on.
Israel was not included in the talks. It found out through its own intelligence.
It was a type of an implosion. We're confronted with this reality in which our principal ally has negotiated behind our backs for 7 months with our worst enemy. Now that is hard to square.
And when it learned about us, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu was furious. He sees this highly sensitive, secretive intelligence coming from Tehran. The Iranians are happy. The American delegates are making concession after concession. And it leads, I think, naturally to harshen the line against the US government and say, this is a very bad deal. You are going to make a very bad deal.
This is a bad deal, a very, very bad deal. It's the deal of the century for Iran. It's a very dangerous and bad deal for peace and the international community.
President Obama is going to speak today at 7 a.m. on the Iranian deal. We will speak.
Today, after 2 years of negotiations, the United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not. A comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
In the summer of 2015, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA for short, was signed by the US, Iran, and 5 other countries over Israel's furious objections.
What a stunning, historic mistake.
It restricted Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for lifting economic sanctions and put in place intensive monitoring by international inspectors.
The objective of the agreement inside the Obama White House was to make sure that the Iranians always were at least a year away from being able to produce a weapon, on the theory that if they ran for it, we'd see them and there would be political time to react.
It cuts off all of Iran's pathways to a bomb.
There were problems with this agreement. The provisions expired too early. The Iranians demanded that they get dwindled down over time. By 2025, as we speak today, they were supposed to be allowed to produce more and more uranium. By 2030, the agreement would end.
At some point, the question is, if you want to stop something as significant as Iran getting a nuclear weapon, is that a worthy objective? Are you better off with no deal or the best deal you can get? We thought, and I continue to believe, that the best deal you can get was something that left the United States, Israel, and the world safer.
I mean, to those who would say that a deal was better than no deal, how do you respond to that?
Always deal is better than a war, but it should be a good deal. That wasn't a good deal.
The Israelis were upset that the deal also gave Iran access to billions of dollars by unfreezing its bank accounts and allowing it to sell oil. Money, they said, would embolden the regime and its proxies.
The notion that Iran got the money as a result of sanctions relief and spent on certain groups or certain parties in the Middle East, that is far from the truth. In fact, we spent lots of money that we received from the sanctions relief on our economy. JCPOA was welcomed not only in Iran, but by the whole international community as a success story of diplomacy.
In spite of Iran's denials, the so-called axis of resistance grew in the wake of the deal. At the center of the axis was Iran's most powerful military strategist, General Qasem Soleimani.
Qasem Soleimani was a truly irreplaceable guy. He did something that is actually rare in modern history. He was able to build a multinational army of tens of thousands of people, of Afghans, of Syrians, of Iraqis, of Palestinians, who would all fight under the command of Iran. This is not something that you learn in military school. It's not something that you learn from a book. It was something that Soleimani had been able to bring about through years of experience.
The most formidable force of all was Hezbollah in Lebanon. It came to be considered the best armed non-state actor in the world.
Militarily speaking, Hezbollah is a bigger threat. It has a lot more fighters, more advanced capabilities than other proxies. But it is more, I'd say, controlled by Iran and also more deterred by Israel. Hamas is a different kind of proxy. Hamas is more independent. It's a Palestinian resistance organization in terroristic means, but it has its own ethos and is more independent in its decisions. It is accepting funding and training and equipment from Iran because Iran is willing to support it, but they have their own motivations and their own decision-making.
Palestinians will vote for a new parliament, and the results could have a major impact on relations with Israel and matters of war and peace.
By now, Hamas was a political force as well as a military one.
The sweeping victory by Hamas is being described as a political earthquake.
In 2006, it had swept national elections and then seized control of Gaza in a civil war.
Hamas has done a lot of damage to our prospects, including the coup d'etat they done in Gaza, and that did really undermine Palestinian national unity and Palestinian international standing, of course.
Hamas gunmen seized control of the rival Fatah government and security offices.
The Palestinian Authority, heir to Arafat's PLO, and longtime participants in the peace process with Israel, retreated to the West Bank.
Gaza becomes a fortress for an organization whose founding charter talks about killing Jews and eliminating Israel. And they are now not just a terrorist organization in Gaza, but the governing organization in Gaza. And that means that the Israelis have to figure out how to deal with them.
The Erez crossing point between Gaza and Israel is now barred to almost all Palestinians.
The Israeli government imposed a blockade on Gaza. It said it was trying to stop Hamas from bringing in weapons and prevent its fighters from crossing into Israel.
The civilian population are facing increasing desperation and misery.
But it also trapped the population.
Israel says that Gazans will not starve on a more basic diet.
The notion that you could keep 2 million people locked up indefinitely with no real economy, who are entirely dependent on Israel opening and closing the border to allow movement of goods and people in, where majority of the people are now impoverished, I think was not only absurd, but also quite cruel.
Hamas, with support from Iran, fired rockets and mortars into Israel. Israel launched airstrikes on Gaza.
I don't suggest that the number of casualties be the determinant of what is proportionate and who's in the right.
Benjamin Netanyahu used the violence to amplify his long-standing concerns about prospects for a Palestinian state.
Netanyahu believes that if you have a Palestinian state in anywhere approximating the 67 borders, the potential for peace is zero, that the capacity for Israel to maintain its security, even in the state it's in now, will be radically diminished, that Hezbollah to its north will be stronger, the problem of Gaza will not be in any way remotely solved. Syria, Iran, shall I go on?
Rockets are still being fired into southern Israel.
But Netanyahu also thought the threats on Israel's borders could be contained without engaging in all-out wars.
The whole building demolished. A member of Hamas lived there, but had left the day before with his family.
For years, most notably in Gaza, a fateful strategy known as mowing the grass.
So the idea was, from time to time, there will be a round of hostilities. Hamas will be beaten hard. This will establish deterrence. Let's keep them on a very low level of capabilities.
This notion that every so often there would need to be predictable rounds of violence, mowing the grass, as Israelis call it, only to result in reinstating the status quo that existed before the violence, was an untenable situation.
The philosophy was that Israel doesn't want to go to a big war. Most of the decision makers in Israel, with uniform and without uniform, thought that to go to war is a mistake. I thought that the mistake is not to initiate a war. And that was the biggest mistake. We allowed Hamas and Hezbollah to be very strong organizations. After the 7th of October, it was understood by the establishment in Israel that we made a huge mistake allowing the beast to grow close to Israel.
Thank you.
The volatile dynamic in the region would begin to shift with the rise of a new American president.
I speak to you today as a lifelong supporter and true friend of Israel. My number one priority is to dismantle the disastrous deal with Iran.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will meet with President Trump today.
That was welcome news to Benjamin Netanyahu, who was one of the first world leaders to meet with Trump at the White House.
Mr. Netanyahu says he's looking forward to a stronger alliance between the US and Israel.
Netanyahu arrived with a plan to create a unified front against Iran, a vision for a new Middle East, where Israel made peace deals with its Arab neighbors.
Netanyahu felt very strongly that that's something we should pursue.
We can seize an historic opportunity.
And I would say, pushed it pretty hard.
And I believe that under your leadership, this change in our region creates an unprecedented opportunity to strengthen security and advance peace.
It was a radical idea that challenged decades of conventional wisdom about the Middle East.
The dogma was basically there'll be no peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors unless and until you solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
And I believe that the great opportunity for peace comes from a regional approach, from involving our newfound Arab partners.
Trump liked the idea, and on his first trip overseas, courted Iran's rivals in the Gulf.
Until the Iranian regime is willing to be a partner for peace, all nations of countries must work together to isolate Iran, deny it, funding for terrorism, cannot do it, and pray for the day when the Iranian people have the just and righteous government they so richly deserve.
He had a receptive audience.
We focused on the Iranian threat, which our Gulf partners felt very acutely. They had viewed the Iran nuclear deal as a betrayal. And the president comes in and says, we're going to stand up to Iran together. We're going to counter Iran together. We're going to get out of the Iran nuclear deal. And this is what our Arab partners and Israel were waiting to hear after 8 years of the Obama administration.
President Trump is reviewing whether the U.S. should stay in the Iran nuclear deal or cancel it.
President Trump's efforts to get out of the deal would get a boost from an Israeli intelligence operation inside Iran.
It was about 2 years in the making by the Mossad until the night of January 31st, 2018.
This heist was like the most brilliant movie-worthy operation. There's this warehouse in a nondescript part of Tehran. The Israelis figure out that it houses the entire nuclear archive, and they do a raid on it. They ship this stuff out when they figured the Iranians wouldn't be looking. Then they begin pouring through it.
I was leading the team that analyzed the findings of the nuclear archives once it arrived, providing us with a comprehensive understanding of Iran's past nuclear weapons activities.
Iran lied. Big time.
Netanyahu seized on it.
This is where they kept the atomic archives, right here. Now, from the outside, this was an innocent-looking compound. It looks like a dilapidated warehouse. But from the inside, it contained Iran's secret atomic archives locked in massive files.
The idea behind the press conference was that we have this amazingly important information to tell the world about Iran.
55,000 pages. Another 55,000 files.
What was the bottom line? Prior to 2003, there was an active bomb project. After 2003, not so much.
Incriminating blueprints.
It left you with very little doubt that the Iranians were trying to deceive the inspectors about past nuclear activity. But that didn't tell you very much about the present day.
Again, you don't have to read Farsi to understand this. This is U-235. That's enriched uranium.
Netanyahu spun this very skillfully to say to the inspectors, the Iranians are pulling your chain.
Was there any evidence in this trove of documents that the Israelis obtained in Tehran that the Iranians were out of compliance with the nuclear deal that Obama had struck with them?
Well, Iran was in technical compliance with the deal. But if the Iranian regime was serious about its nuclear program being peaceful, then what are they doing keeping a warehouse full of tens of thousands of pages on how to build a nuclear weapon and not disclosing it to the Obama administration?
Iran continues to lie.
The Iranian government called Netanyahu's press conference childish and ridiculous.
Arif said this.
We never wanted to produce a bomb.
Yes, you did. Yes, you do. In the atomic archive.
And claimed that the documents were fake.
The nuclear deal.
With all due respect, sir, what was the purpose? What was the reason Iran would have a warehouse in Tehran in which there were documents about how to build a bomb?
No, I cannot, concur with the news that that warehouse was full of documents related to so-called Iranian nuclear weapon program. The Israelis needed to create certain documents so that they could persuade President Trump in terms of leaving the JCPOA.
The most important value of the press conference was adding fuel to fire to say that this was an awful deal.
The nuclear deal gives Iran a clear path to an atomic arsenal.
In that press conference, Prime Minister Netanyahu's most important audience was President Trump.
President Trump will make his decision on what to do with the nuclear deal. I'm sure he'll do the right thing.
It happened a week after the press conference.
I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
He'd go on to impose severe sanctions and boast about it on Twitter.
After we got out of the deal, we reimposed economic sanctions. Trump called it maximum pressure.
What was the strategy of maximum pressure? What was the actual aim of it?
If you put enough pressure on Iran economically, the hope was, at least my hope was, the people would rise and say, we're not going to put up with this anymore. You spent billions of dollars on nuclear weapons, on supporting terrorist groups. People of Iran have not benefited at all, and we're done with it.
America will not be held hostage to nuclear blackmail.
President Trump made a very big mistake. He destroyed the mutual trust, mutual confidence, backing of the negotiations or endeavors, not only Iranian endeavors, but also all of the international community. Because after the JCPOA, all of the international community welcomed it. And President Trump destroyed all of these achievements in international arena.
Inside Iran, Trump's move emboldened hardliners in the government and military.
I think what the Revolutionary Guard took away from Trump coming out of the deal was that their belief that the United States never intended to make peace with Iran was validated. So the wing of the regime that argued that the only way to back the United States off is by being aggressive had won, and they became empowered. And that would continue all the way to eventually the Israel-Iran war.
From Iran's president, an ominous threat. Hassan Rouhani delivered an almost instantaneous response.
Tehran warns it may restart its uranium enrichment program on a, quote, industrial scale.
No longer constrained by Obama's deal, Iran would start increasing its uranium enrichment.
When the U.S. withdrew, I wrote and I said many times that more sanctions and pressures using the Iranian nuclear issue would lead to more enrichment, and Iran will increase the capacity and the level of enrichment. to show to the US that they are not going to capitulate under pressure and they will resist.
ما الان بالای تقریبا داریم به 6 کیلو میرسیم، 5.5 فکر می‌کنم حجم غنی‌سازی اورانیوم.
After we left the Iran nuclear deal, it wasn't a surprise that Iran started increasing its enrichment levels. We expected that to happen. But we thought that that illustrated the problem. What does it say about the Iran nuclear deal that Iran is able to restart it so quickly and to increase its enrichment levels to such a degree?
During the first Trump term, Iran's nuclear capabilities continue, if not accelerate. The proxies grow stronger. So what was the net effect of maximum pressure during the first Trump term?
I don't think we applied maximum pressure. I think it's great rhetoric, but it didn't really work. We had to do more. We should have done more to undermine the regime in Iran.
Iran's top general, Qasem Soleimani, taunted Trump.
We had a clash of personalities. The bombastic Soleimani with his global fame, certainly regional fame, and President Trump. His favorite word is the tough guy. They start posting memes about each other, Games of Thrones memes, and Soleimani starts giving speeches. He calls him Trump the gambler.
به شما میگویم آقای ترامپ قمارباز.
And he used this phrase. There's kind of a bit of a cheesy line. It's almost like a B movie in Hollywood, but the Iranian military leaders love to repeat it, which is, you started this war, we will finish it.
این جنگ را شما شروع میکنید اما پایانش را ما ترسیم میکنیم.
The heated words turned into action.
U.S. intelligence indicates the unprecedented attack on Saudi oil fields originated from Iran.
Iran and its network of militias launched a wave of attacks in the region.
This intelligence over recent weeks had led them to believe that Iran or its proxies may have had a
Soleimani was also stepping up his support for Hamas.
Soleimani used money, guns, effectively an unlimited blank check, giving them suitcases full of cash, giving them advanced military equipment, not just any military equipment, logistical, military trainings, which at the time didn't all look to be relevant. Some of these trainings included attacks from the sea. They included paraglider attacks, tactics that were later used in October 7, 2023.
The Trump administration was growing increasingly concerned about Soleimani.
He was a threat. He was a threat to us, and he was a threat to U.S. citizens across the region. And that threat rose as we went into the final months of 2019.
There came a time when the intelligence was fairly clear that General Soleimani was plotting a mass casualty attack against American troops in the Middle East. President Trump's National Security Cabinet concluded that the risks of not taking action outweighed the risks of taking action.
Iran's military commander, General Qasem Soleimani.
Qasem Soleimani killed in a U.S. drone strike outside of Baghdad's international airport.
Missiles from the U.S. drone hit their convoy as it left the airport.
We elected ultimately to strike him in Baghdad because we could strike him there with minimal collateral damage, which was always of concern to us.
Last night, at my direction, the United States military successfully executed a flawless precision strike that killed the #1 terrorist anywhere in the world, Qasem Soleimani.
I was the officer responsible for it. It was a CENTCOM-controlled operation using Special Operations Task Force.
Some of the reaction pouring in today, big threats towards the United States from senior Iranian officials, including Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, who called all of this a heinous crime committed by the United States.
We won that round. We took a major asset off the table, an asset that the Iranians miss to this day as you and I speak. And it has affected their planning in every way that you can affect a nation's planning.
In the wake of Soleimani's death, the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, was widely viewed as the most powerful figure in the Axis.
وإن أقصى ما يمكن أن نتطلع إليه هو أن نقتل في سبيل الله عز وجل.
Nasrallah sees this as a alliance or network of like-minded groups who would basically create an arc of fire around Israel. So you have Hezbollah, something in the West Bank, maybe down the road in Jordan, Hamas in Gaza, and then you have Iranian militia presence in Syria. You have these militias in Iraq. You have Houthis that are being armed to the teeth with long-range missiles, who also were being trained and mentored by Nasrallah and Hezbollah.
But as Iran and its proxies were strengthening their arc of fire,
at the White House today, Israel and two Arab nations signed a
Israel was making alliances of its own.
normalize relations and bring them closer together.
Trump and Netanyahu's vision for the region was becoming a reality. Two Arab countries, the UAE and Bahrain, announced they would normalize relations with Israel in what was known as the Abraham Accords.
After decades of division and conflict, we mark the dawn of a new Middle East. Thanks to the great courage of the leaders of these three countries.
This day is a pivot of history. It heralds a new dawn of peace.
The interest of the Gulf countries to come to the Abraham Accords is very much connected with Iran's influence in the region. They feel threatened by Iran. They want security assurances from the United States. They see how Israel is a gateway to the American public and to the American administration. And they are being pressured by the influence of Iran and by the way that Iran is sometimes attacking. And now they understand that they might need this alliance with Israel.
It was the first peace treaty between Israel and any Arab country in almost 30 years.
They're doing all this without any real movement on the Palestinian issue. For Netanyahu, this was the crown jewel of his legacy to a certain degree.
Left out, the Palestinians, abandoned by their Arab neighbors, powerless to do anything but protest.
It was primarily a confirmation to us that Israel is truly not interested in peace. That the only agenda is to completely undermine, avoid, bypass the issue, which is the issue of Palestine, by almost working, that is Netanyahu, like a magician, abracadabra. Here you go. You see, I'm normalizing and I'm opening new relations. I'm going all over the Middle East and the Arab world without having to resolve the issue, which is the Palestinian issue.
در پایان عرض بکنم راجع به این خیانتی که متاسفانه
Iran's leader used the Abraham Accords as a rallying cry.
هم به دنیای اسلام خیانت کرد هم به دنیای عرب.
It's the perfect opportunity for Ayatollah Khamenei to come in and say, don't worry, there is a state that will continue to champion you, that will continue to fight Israel, that will buck this regional trend, that is not motivated by material interests. There's nothing that they could give Iran that would have it give up the cause of Palestine or to become friends with the Jewish state. Khamenei takes his mantle and uses it to expand the axis of resistance against the Arab states and Israel.
The International Atomic Energy Agency presented its latest report.
Iran has been openly breaching these limits for some time now, apparently in retaliation for the US withdrawing from that nuclear deal.
The consequences of leaving the nuclear deal continued to rack up.
Uranium stockpile is now 12 times its limit under the agreement.
And would soon confront a new presidential administration, one more inclined to re-engage with Iran.
The U.S. has said it is ready to restart nuclear talks with Iran.
We're prepared to re-engage in negotiations on Iran's nuclear program.
Iran's foreign minister saying that the U.S. must lift all sanctions before Iran will make any move.
President Biden began trying to get Iran back to the negotiating table. He would eventually ease some of Trump's so-called maximum pressure sanctions. I mean, by not enforcing sanctions, though, wasn't the Biden administration basically empowering Iran during this period of time?
President Biden was trying to demonstrate his willingness to return to an agreement that would lift some sanctions, lift additional sanctions, but Iran would have to abide by certain commitments. Iran wasn't willing to abide by those commitments. So at the end of the day, there was no agreement.
With the US and Iran at an impasse, Israel was consumed by crises at home.
For allegedly accepting bribes and a breach of trust.
Netanyahu was embroiled in a corruption scandal that would reshape his government.
His own personal affairs lead eventually to 3 different indictments on criminal charges, including bribery, charges that he has always claimed are bogus and are intent to persecute him.
To survive politically, he formed a coalition with Israel's most extreme right-wing parties.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has inaugurated the most far-right government in the country's history.
The appointment of Bezalel Smotrich as finance minister and minister of the defense ministry and Itamar Ben-Gvir as a minister of national security was a real sea change.
Itamar Ben-Gvir supports relaxing open-fire rules against Palestinian rioters.
Ben-Gvir actually pulled out a gun while on a recent visit to a predominantly Palestinian neighborhood.
We had never seen those extreme parts of the Israeli political system present in the Israeli cabinet before. And because Prime Minister Netanyahu was so dependent on them for his political survival, it raised the question of whether these 2 extremist figures would really be the ones pulling the strings of Israeli policy.
The new government faced pushback as it tried to consolidate power.
Controversial plans to overhaul the justice system. It was a sudden outpouring of rage,
triggering weeks of massive protests. An
That led to, I would say, the biggest wave of protest in the history of the country, and probably the most severe political crisis and social crisis in the history of the country. In many meetings, the chiefs of Israeli intelligence warned Netanyahu that the political crisis and its effect on the military are perceived by Israeli enemy as the time to take more aggressive initiative against Israel.
There were actually quite a lot of warnings saying, look, we're creating here the perfect storm. And at one point or another, one of our enemies would use that to start a war because they would feel that we're weak and that we're consumed with our own domestic political problems.
That summer, Hamas dispatched officials to Iran and Lebanon.
Hamas is pitching an idea to Tehran and Beirut. And the idea is we can destroy Israel. We will invade Israel. And then Hezbollah, you'll shoot in the north and you'll invade Israel. Then Iran will join. And then we'll have volunteers coming from across the Muslim world.
The Iranians did not know the timing. They may have known the overall intent, but not the timing. And that was mostly for operational security on Hamas's part.
There's no question. The Abraham Accords.
Throughout that summer, Iran and its proxies were also hearing of other plans, that Netanyahu and Biden were preparing to bring Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords.
Khamenei was certainly very worried that Saudi Arabia could establish ties with Israel, not only because of the fact of the relations, because that would have further isolated Iran, would have opened the Israeli presence in the Persian Gulf even more. But part of that deal would be the deepening of American-Saudi relationship.
By late September, Netanyahu was talking about it on the world stage.
He said, we are going to have peace with Saudi Arabia, and the Palestinians should not have a veto on that.
I've long sought to make peace with the Palestinians. But I also believe that we must not give the Palestinians a veto over new peace treaties with Arab states.
Which is, in a different language, from my point of view, the Palestinians can off. Sorry, but excuse my French.
Now, for years, my approach to peace was rejected by the so-called experts. Well, they were wrong. Peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia will truly create a new Middle East.
The leaders of Hamas, as they explained to us, they see this and they understand that in a moment, the Palestinian issue will be completely taken off the world agenda. Now, they came to the conclusion, a jihadist conclusion, of blood, of murder, of massacre. They wanted regional war.
This morning, Hamas opened a murderous surprise attack against the state of Israel
and sent dozens of fighters across the country's heavily fortified border area of the Gaza Strip.
We failed. We failed. The IDF was built in order to prevent such incidents.
The militants infiltrating multiple cities in Israel.
Such sins we saw, raping and killing Jews for the sake of being Jews. We were thinking that we can contain this threat. We can live our lives and they will live their lives, and that's it. And we allowed this threat to grow and grow to the extent they launched the attack on October 7th.
The architect of the attacks was Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader in Gaza.
It became clearer over time that Sinwar had really jumped the gun. Now, it's not to say that Hamas had not discussed such prospects with Hezbollah, with Iran, but on the day of, it appears, from everything we've seen, that he really decided to go for broke himself without coordination.
October 7th would transform Israel's security strategy and the region.
It was understood in Israel that we have to change the whole sentiment and the way that we are acting in our neighborhood. We will not allow our enemies to build capabilities that might endanger the existence of Israel. And it was a very important lesson from the 7th of October. But we will take it on about the future of the Middle East. The mistake that we did before the 7th of October will not repeat itself.
It's been a day that has shocked this country. Their defenses breached with ease.
The scale of these attacks, waves of attacks, are absolutely stunning.
Israel is at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it.
Israel says it's on war footing. Now the mission is to destroy Hamas.
Israel itself is striking back, launching its own airstrikes.
Within hours, Israel began bombing Gaza, and Hamas called for the rest of Iran's axis to join the fight.
إخواننا في المقاومة الإسلامية في لبنان وإيران واليمن والعراق وسوريا. هذا هو اليوم الذي تلتحم فيه مقاومتكم مع أهلكم في فلسطين.
Netanyahu feared an all-out attack was imminent.
So the Prime Minister and I spoke that day. He laid out his concern about how Iran and its proxy forces beyond Hamas would try to take advantage of this situation and hit Israel hard at a moment when Israel, frankly, was reeling.
Now, ask from the Biden administration was first and foremost to send deterrent messages in words and deeds to both Iran and Hezbollah. Our senior leadership were concerned about Hezbollah, lest Hezbollah follow Hamas.
The Lebanese militant group Hezbollah has gotten involved in the fighting.
On October 8th, Hezbollah began to fire rockets into northern Israel.
There was an exchange of fire between Hezbollah and Israel.
A senior Hezbollah official pledged solidarity with the Palestinians who carried out attacks on Israel.
The nation is with you. Our heart, minds, souls, our history and guns and rockets and all that we have is with you.
An escalation along one of the most volatile borders in the region.
October 7th really was a point at which this circle of fire went into offensive action against Israel. The balance seemed to be in Iran's favor. I mean, his axis was ascendant, had Israel on his back heel.
It seems clear we are heading for a wider war. The U.S. is moving a carrier strike group and more fighter jets to the region.
I have to say, we came perilously close to a much broader regional conflict in that first week. in the fog and the friction and the unknowns. The lack of clear information of exactly what was happening, honestly, in Israel, in Beirut, in Tehran, in Washington, it's a classic security dilemma where one side sees another side moving and believes the worst is coming and might act preemptively to stop it, when in fact, the other side might just be moving to more defensible positions, or they're moving because they're uncertain.
In Tehran, the Ayatollah praised the October 7th attacks.
بدانند سران و تصمیمگیران رژیم غاصب و حمایت کنندگانشان که همین کار بلای بزرگتری بر سر آنها خواهد آورد.
But he denied Iran was involved.
We totally reject the notion that Iran was aware of the attack. We totally reject the notion that there were meetings between Iranians and others on this.
With the violence threatening to spiral into a full-scale regional war, President Biden warned Israel's enemies to stay out of the fight.
To any country, any organization, anyone thinking of taking advantage of this situation, I have one word: don't. Don't.
Biden referred to Iran, Hezbollah, though even not saying this. He said, I'm saying to anyone, be aware. Do not dare to join this fight, because then at the end of that, you'll find the mighty firepower of the United States.
In the weeks that followed, the Houthis fired on Israel from Yemen. Shia militias in Iraq hit U.S. bases, and Hezbollah and Israel continued to exchange fire. But the clashes didn't escalate further.
We kept the engagement between us and Hezbollah in a very low fire. That was the interest of Hezbollah as well.
Nasrallah and Hezbollah wanted to support Hamas symbolically, as well as put pressure on Israel on its northern border in order to prevent IDF to fully focus on Gaza. But Nasrallah also had to think about what does it mean for his community. If Israel began to hit Lebanon with a lot of missiles or invaded Lebanon, Nasrallah believed that actually he could contain the level of engagement.
Israel's ground war has started.
Their mission to root out Hamas and also to find hostages. More than 200 hostages are still being held.
Hamas says its fighters are involved in clashes with Israeli forces.
For the moment, Israel was focusing on Gaza.
They have moved on more than 600 targets and tried to target Hamas infrastructure, in particular the network of tunnels.
The IDF has said repeatedly there are command centers stationed underneath hospitals in Gaza.
For people in Gaza, a growing humanitarian crisis.
Israel has cut off all food, water, and help.
A panel of UN experts is warning of the potential for war crimes.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had called those comments hogwash and said Israel doesn't target civilians and any innocents who die in Gaza are, quote, collateral damage.
More than 11,000 Palestinians have been killed in the war.
By December, amid mounting civilian casualties and international criticism of Israel's campaign, Biden's team was growing alarmed about Netanyahu's strategy. What was the vision? What was the war aim as Netanyahu was stating it?
None. I mean, it was basically total victory without definition of what total victory actually was. We have to go in, we have to destroy, and you try to have that next layer of conversation, like to do what, right? And, you know, he would publicly make the case, total victory. We can't talk about the day after until we've achieved total victory.
There is no substitute for victory. And our victory will be your victory. Peace and security require total victory over Hamas.
What does total victory actually mean?
I don't know what it means, but I will tell you that the fact that we did not present a coherent strategy was not because we did not discuss it. I think it was more due to political reasons.
Some far-right members of Netanyahu's coalition fiercely opposed any ceasefire or compromise that would leave Palestinians running Gaza.
We knew that Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, the two most extreme ministers, ultimately did not want the war to end, or at least for them the war meant total victory and then Israeli reoccupation and settlement of Gaza.
That was not the position of the government, that was not the position of the prime minister, and that was not the position of the defense establishment and all of us who were involved in this process. But it created a lot of pressures in our government.
Netanyahu, we believed, was concerned that if he agreed to any post-conflict option that didn't allow for Israel to maintain control over Gaza, to establish settlements, he would risk seeing them bolt the coalition and collapse the government.
Thousands of Palestinians have been killed, wounded, or are missing.
These are disproportionate attacks that could be war crimes.
With no end in sight, some of the president's advisors argued he should break with Netanyahu and publicly criticize how the war was being fought.
There was some openness, both at the State Department and at the White House, to this idea, and they did discuss it. I think ultimately the concern was that if we demonstrated daylight with Prime Minister Netanyahu, it would embolden Israel's enemies. So Hamas would be encouraged because they would think the U.S.-Israel relationship was breaking up. Hezbollah would escalate. Additional proxies would get involved. Iran might see an opportunity.
6 months into the Gaza offensive, it appeared that a full-scale regional war had been averted. Then, in April, Israel made a provocative move against Iran.
Iran is accusing Israel of attacking its embassy complex in Syria.
Eliminating one of Tehran's most senior military commanders.
Killed in what they described as an Israeli airstrike which targeted...
Israel attacked Iranian embassy in Syria. They killed high-level IRGC commanders. It was an attack on Iranian territory.
The Iranians took it as we hit their own sovereignty because they claimed it was in their embassy building. It wasn't. It was a building next to the embassy. And we made our calculations. And we were ready for any implications for this action.
Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has led Eid prayers in Tehran. He used his speech to call for retaliation against Israel.
رژیم خبیث اشتباه کرد. در این قضیه باید تنبیه بشود و تنبیه خواهد شد.
Were you concerned that basically Israel had just escalated the war?
I was concerned that as a result of what Israel had done, there would be an Iranian reaction, and that could set off a chain of events that could cause an explosion into a wider war. And I think one thing that now sitting here in 2025, it's hard for people who weren't living this day to day to appreciate is we were picking up the paper every morning and there were headlines, all out Middle East war on the horizon, on the edge, region teeters, on the brink. We were living through a period where the possibility that the United States of America would be dragged into another major war in the Middle East was real.
Within days, intelligence reports showed the Iranians were preparing a major response. Biden and Netanyahu got on the phone.
Prime Minister Netanyahu said to the president, we'd like your support, we'd like your help to be able to defend against this. And the president said, I think you misjudged the consequences of your strike. You didn't think Iran was going to gear up for a big attack, and they are. Nonetheless, I, Joe Biden, am going to tell my military to make sure that we help defend you so that an Iranian attack on Israel does not succeed.
Tonight, we are in uncharted, unprecedented territory.
Iranian drones on their way, apparently, to attack Israel.
In April 2024, Iran finally does something that it had never done before. It attacks Israel directly. It finds a justification to say since Iranian diplomatic territory in Damascus was attacked, Iran could now attack Israeli territory directly.
Israel's air defenses called to action. Fighter jets battled waves of Iranian drones and missiles.
This is the first time that Iran has done a direct conventional military attack against Israel. They had used their proxies, they had used terrorism, they had used every dirty trick in the books, but never had they directed their military to load up a bunch of missiles and drones and fire them from the territory of Iran to the territory of Israel. So this was a watershed moment.
Almost all of the drones and missiles were destroyed before they reached their targets by a military coalition including Israel, the United States, and several Arab countries.
The regime tried to claim that this Operation True Promise One was a grand success, that it had given Israelis a lesson, that it had pushed the Zionists back, that it has shown that Iran was this heroic state that would stand up to the Israelis.
They did not want to kill Israelis. They did not want to create big mess. They just wanted to give a message that if we are attacked, we would reciprocate.
The Iranians have said they didn't intend to kind of inflict damage in that April attack, and that it was really just more to send a message. What's your response to that?
You don't launch 200 projectiles, including ballistic missiles, into a state for not making damage. Because they failed, they said that they didn't intend to make any damage. You don't do it if you don't want to make damage on the other side.
Once again, President Biden urged restraint.
The message from the US administration was, you're very successful defensively, take the win and don't strike back.
The Israelis decided to retaliate, but they were very careful not to strike the Iranian nuclear program.
Sources characterizing the early morning strikes as limited. Iran was dismissive, saying this was just a tiny drone attack.
They hit key cities and areas around it, but not at military bases that were nuclear related. You have to think of these as warning shots of saying, we can reach you when we want to.
In Gaza, the war ground on. 7 months after October 7th, Hamas continued to hold hostages.
Tens of thousands of Israelis rallied in protest at delays in getting the hostages out of Gaza.
And the Israeli military had killed more than 30,000 Palestinians.
Breaking this morning, the International Criminal Court is seeking arrest warrants for Israeli and Hamas leaders, including
Prime Minister Netanyahu on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Mr. Netanyahu described the move as absurd.
כראש ממשלת ישראל, אני דוחה בשאט נפש את ההשוואה של התובע בהאג בין ישראל הדמוקרטית לבין רבי המרצחים של החמאס.
The Biden administration's concerns about Israel's campaign were intensifying.
Israel is facing backlash for a deadly airstrike
that killed dozens of people in a designated safe zone for displaced Palestinians.
There were incidents that were deeply questionable. And you could see the possibility that it did violate international law in one way or another. And I think that concern was widely shared throughout the administration, including by US government lawyers who tend to be pretty conservative in making such judgments.
Yahya Sinwar, the military leader of Hamas, is suspected to be hiding out in the tunnels under Gaza.
There are new reports that Sinwar has said that he has the upper hand over Israel and that the civilian casualties seen in Gaza are, quote, necessary sacrifices.
Israel defended its actions, accusing Hamas of using civilians as human shields, which it has denied.
Innocent people died in Gaza. Nobody's saying otherwise. This is war, and war is ugly. That's things happen, but there was not a policy of deliberately targeting people there. We made mistakes. We are responsible for the mistakes we made. Many civilians were killed in that war, and that's tragic. The loss of life, any life, Israeli or Palestinian, is tragic.
But pressure was mounting on the U.S. to rein in Israel's assault.
The U.S. should revoke the license of exporting arms to Israel. There has to be an arms embargo, and then Netanyahu will listen.
Ambassador Hussam Zumlatt was making the case in the international media.
I was so looking for a word, a phrase to coin what is happening. What is it? Apocalyptic? Armageddon? The U.S. is capable to tap on their shoulder and tell them, change course. Enough. It's the U.S. that provides all these weapons and arms to Israel. We all know that the U.S. could stop this, and the fact that it didn't is a stain in the history of our international community, and certainly is a stain in the U.S. history.
Protests against American support for Israel were spreading across the world.
Your dictator do genocide, Joe! Tens of thousands of Palestinians! Genocide, Joe! It's got to go!
Demonstrators demand an end to U.S. support for Israel amid the humanitarian crisis and devastating death toll in Gaza.
To those who want to know whether the United States used all of its leverage, it's the superpower in this relationship, to basically avert a catastrophe, civilian deaths, humanitarian disaster in Gaza. What do you say to those who say that the president did not use all the tools he had at his disposal to basically avert a catastrophe?
I think the main argument that people make in saying President Biden should have exercised more leverage on the prime minister is that he should have stopped the flow of weapons to Israel. That was the main source of leverage that people tend to focus on. Stop sending weapons to Israel. And I understand the logic of that. I have my doubts about even if we had done that, it would have stopped Israel from taking the actions they did. But set that aside. President Biden decided he was not going to cut off weapons to Israel because they weren't just fighting Hamas. They were fighting Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Syrian militias, the Iraqi militias, and they were taking attacks from Iran itself. And President Biden wasn't going to leave Israel high and dry when it was facing a multi-front war.
The U.S. is ramping up diplomatic pressure surrounding hostage release and ceasefire talks involving Israel.
Throughout that summer, the Biden administration was focused on diplomacy, trying to get Israel and Hamas to agree to a ceasefire in Gaza. But Israel was planning to take the conflict to another level.
At a certain point in the summer last year, Defense Minister Gallant said to us, I have plenty of bullets, but I've run out of targets. He didn't have large targets to go after to achieve this breaking down of Hamas's military organizational capabilities.
Behind the scenes, the IDF believed they had made enough progress against Hamas to take on Hezbollah.
When we felt enough confidence that we can contain the situation in Gaza and to move enough forces to Lebanon, we did so. And we acted. And we acted very sharply, very precisely.
Israel's Mossad spy agency placed explosives in thousands of Hezbollah pages before they detonated.
They were carried by members of the Iran-backed Hezbollah terrorist group.
A funeral for those killed the day before is disrupted by another explosion. A wave of walkie-talkie blasts across Lebanon killed more than a dozen and injured hundreds.
For around a decade, Israeli intelligence had been putting in place a covert plan to attack Hezbollah with booby-trapped pagers and walkie-talkies. After the group became suspicious, the plan was activated.
The problem was use it or lose it. If you don't use it, you might lose it. And the decision was use it.
Once again, the United States was caught by surprise.
Basically, I think they sensed a window of opportunity and they seized it.
And the president's thought on that was what?
First, it was, wait, why did you work with us on this whole ceasefire thing? So we did feel that they veered off down a different road than the one that we had been coordinating on and working together. But at the end of the day, in short order, dismantling the effective capability of a murderous terrorist organization that also has American blood on his hands is a good thing for the United States and a good thing for the region.
All in all, about 30 people died, including 2 children. Around 3,000 were injured.
With Hezbollah reeling, Israeli forces went after the group's missile capabilities.
The Patriot attack is, of course, a story for the James Bond movie, 007. It captured the world in terms of Israel's military abilities. But the real story is how Israel, through the Israeli military branch of intelligence, the same branch that failed on October 7, and the Israeli Air Force, that also failed on October 7, managed to basically destroy most of the inventories of missiles and rockets held by Hezbollah in their silos, in their bunkers, without those being launched against Israel.
Israel's Air Force could now take out Hezbollah's commanders. They got precise intelligence about the group's leader, Hassan Nasrallah.
15 minutes before we hit Nasrallah, I called Secretary Austin. And I said, the plans are on the air. We are going to kill this bastard. And he said it's going to create a major event in the Middle East. I said, Mr. Secretary, this guy is a bad guy.
A stunning escalation in Israel's fight against the Iran-backed terror group Hezbollah. Tonight, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his country had settled the score with the killing of the group's longtime leader, Hassan Nasrallah.
The Iranians threatening that the Israelis had opened up the gates of hell. This was a major momentum shift across the entire Middle East.
The Biden administration message to you was, don't escalate, let's not risk a regional war. It doesn't seem as though the Israelis really heeded that advice.
Israel felt that it had to do what it had to do. Again, you have to understand the psychology of Israelis after October 7th. I think the main psychological gap between us and the administration was that we felt this is an existential situation. After October 7th, we cannot end this war with Hamas standing, with any of our neighbors being able to hit us this way. Nowhere, no more.
After Nasrallah's death, there was no major response from Hezbollah.
If you would have told me in 2022 that in the days that we will assassinate and send Nasrallah to hell, that there will not be one missile over Tel Aviv, I will ask you, what have you drank? What have you smoked? It seems like not possible.
The collapse of Hezbollah was possible, not just because Israel was very clever, but also because Israel was willing to carry out the kind of operations that other countries might not do. The kind of impunity with which Israel operated in Gaza without getting any pushback from Europe or the United States carried into Lebanon as well. There are large numbers of civilians who were killed. For instance, in the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, which happened with a very massive bomb dropped on South Beirut. So the assassinations, the pager attacks, etc., were successful, largely because Israel was willing to accept the civilian casualties and the collateral damage that it would involve.
We are not aiming at civilians. We are not aiming at innocent people.
But civilians are dying.
James, you are right. This is the environment we are living in. I would prefer to fight an enemy who prefers to fight me with his weapons and not using his own civilians as human shields.
4 days after the assassination of Nasrallah, the retaliation came, direct from Iran.
Iran has just launched a retaliatory missile attack targeting Israel.
The supreme leader decides to order the Islamic Republic to enter the war again and attack Israel full-blown.
Israel says its air defense is taking out most of the incoming missiles.
نیروهای مسلح ما در 2 شب قبل هم یک کار کاملا قانونی و مشروع بود.
The world is now waiting to see how Israel responds.
This time, the Israelis went much further. They took out Iranian missile defenses around Tehran and around some of the nuclear sites. They took out Iranian missile operations. And by taking out the air defenses, the message was, we could own your airspace, so don't tempt us.
Iran's ring of fire was disintegrating across the entire region, with a major setback in Gaza.
One of the world's most hunted men is dead. Hamas military leader Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of the October 7th attacks, was killed by Israeli troops in southern Gaza.
And in Syria, where Iran's ally, the dictator Bashar al-Assad, was forced from power.
Assad has fled to Moscow, and it is now a coalition of rebel groups that are in charge.
The whole ring was broken. Hamas was destroyed by us. Hezbollah is now isolated within Lebanon. It doesn't have any connection to Iran because the bridge was broken. The Iranians cannot send him through land anything. And without the ring, Iran became much weaker.
A number of factors, all in the span of just a few short months, completely upended the game in the Middle East when it came to the shadow war between Israel and Iran. Iran's proxies are on their back. Iran's client, Assad, is gone. Iran's air defenses are gone. And so this is just a different moment in the Middle East than what we inherited when we walked into office.
For Benjamin Netanyahu, it was an opportunity to do what he'd been advocating for decades.
Deterrence must now be reinforced with prevention, immediate and effective prevention. This is not a hypothesis. It is fact. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb. Weeks away from having the fissile material. Iran lied.
The path was finally clear to attack Iran's nuclear program.
The horizon opened for Israelis and suddenly realized that, having hit hard on the Iranian axis, on the tentacles, we can now aim at what many people call the head of the snake, which is Iran.
Now, if you listen to the Israelis, they will tell you that as soon as Hezbollah fell, they began receiving a new stream of intelligence, suggesting that the Iranians had made a decision to race for a bomb and had built a separate cell that most Iranian leaders didn't even know about that was reviving the old bomb project. They informed the Americans of their intelligence. I have yet to find any American officials who believed that Iran was racing for a bomb.
In November, Netanyahu issued a secret directive to his military to begin planning for an attack. But they needed help. Only the US had bombs capable of destroying Iran's underground nuclear facilities. With 2 months until a new US administration, Netanyahu decided to wait.
So I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you very much. And
thank you.
Benjamin, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you,
President. Thank you, Don. Thank you. Mr. President, I want to first thank you for inviting me again to the White House. You've been a remarkable friend of the State of Israel. You stand by us. You're standing.
Then Trump went in a surprising direction.
Wait a minute. Wait. We're having direct talks with Iran. And
Trump announces that he is going to open up negotiations with the Iranians to see how it goes.
And I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable.
You can just see Netanyahu's discomfort in his seat. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. He was supposed to have in the Oval Office the great Iran hawk.
But it's getting to be very dangerous territory. And hopefully
you don't have to be a great psychologist to see how unhappy Netanyahu was with the idea of another prolonged negotiation.
Officials from the U.S. and Iran holding high-stakes.
A few days later, in Oman, negotiations began between the U.S. and Iran.
Side said going into these talks that they were looking for some sort of deal. The Iranians want those crushing economic sanctions lifted. The Americans want to see restrictions on Iran's nuclear program.
You know, we started negotiations in good faith, and Iran was sincere in its desire to arrive at a conclusion in terms of its nuclear program. From the American side, they were also showing signs that they were also eager to find an agreement with Iran.
Will you give us the readout on the Iran talks, sir?
I think they're going okay.
What was your,
I can't tell you because nothing matters until you get it done.
From Rome, where this morning Iran and the United States are sitting down for a new round of talks on Iran's nuclear program.
A lot is at stake, and there's every sense that time is ticking for these sides to reach a deal.
Trump had given a 60-day deadline to agree to a deal.
The Israeli government was absolutely convinced that the Iranians are just trying to stall the negotiations. They're just playing for time, said the Israelis to their American counterparts.
The president means what he says, which is they cannot have a bomb.
As talks progressed, Trump's chief negotiator, Steve Witkoff, suggested a compromise was possible.
So this is going to be much about verification on the enrichment program.
Witkoff publicly said, well, maybe the Iranians could go back to the same kind of enrichment levels they had in the Obama deal. Well, everybody leapt on that, me included, and wrote stories saying he's talking about reviving the Obama-era deal. This was not what President Trump wanted to be reading. The administration took a hard turn and said, no enrichment, zero enrichment in Iran.
For the Iranians, this was a red line.
Dismantling of all Iranian enrichment facilities, which was impossible. They knew it's not going to happen. Trump is telling Iranians, a nation with 7,000 years of civilization and history, he tells them, when you negotiate with me, unconditional surrender. Of course, Iranians would not accept it.
The sixth round of Iran-US nuclear talks is planned as the two sides remain locked in a standoff.
Trump gave the Iranians 60 days, and during those months, I heard from people here in Israel around the prime minister, they kept on saying, watch out for the 60 days.
Israel's military was now preparing an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities.
During the discussions and deliberations in the cabinet, the closed cabinet, and with the chief of staff, Netanyahu was very clear. He said, go do your stuff, make sure it's a stunning success, and upon that success, I will bring President Trump. So he knew his thought, gamble, whatever, is if Israel succeeds, if it is indeed a stunning operation, President Trump would want to be part of the success.
Thank you so much, my goodness, Rebecca. Thank you. I appreciate you, my friend.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival.
More than 200 fighter jets were aimed at Iran's main enrichment facility.
Iran state TV says the strikes killed several top military leaders and nuclear scientists.
We took them by surprise, and we attacked all these targets simultaneously and repeatedly for 2 weeks.
They caught many of the military leadership, the head of the Air Force and others, asleep in their own beds. The Israelis put missiles right into their bedrooms and killed them.
It was a war which was based totally on intelligence. Israel succeeded to kill probably more than 12 very sophisticated, the hardcore of weaponization group scientists.
We will not have a second Holocaust, a nuclear Holocaust.
انشاءالله با قدرت عمل خواهد شد و با اونها مماشاتی نخواهیم کرد.
Iran's retaliation has begun.
This time, when Iran retaliated, some of its missiles got through Israel's defenses.
At least 5 people have been killed and dozens injured in the latest round of missile strikes launched by Iran.
Iran accused the U.S. of using the negotiations as cover.
And I could hear people are chanting, "Death to America." They say enabled the war.
When the Israelis attacked us, that showed that the Americans have approved this. Now we have realized that they have been cooperative in the course of aggression from day one. How can anybody else trust the Americans when they say something?
No current Trump administration officials would agree to be interviewed. At the time, the president said that the U.S. had nothing to do with Israel's strikes.
I've never found any evidence that the Israelis got a green light from the White House. I think they got a yellow caution light, which was, you go do this, you may be in it for yourself. As the Israelis were increasingly successful, Trump began, in that usual Donald Trump way, to want a piece of the victory.
We're doing pretty well. Right now, we're doing pretty well. Remember, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. I gave Iran 60 days, and they said no. And the 61st, you saw what happened.
And meanwhile, a back channel developed about whether the U.S. would now be willing, since the Israelis had cleared the way, to go after Natanz and Fordo.
On June 19th, President Trump's spokeswoman said he was taking time to decide whether to join the war.
I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks.
From the beginning, that 2-week utterance from President Trump was tactical deception. He had already approved the plan. He signed the execute order the next afternoon, and the planes were in the air the next day.
The United States has entered Israel's war with Iran. American stealth bombers and submarines launched a massive coordinated attack.
Unprecedented strikes against Iran's nuclear enrichment sites.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace.
President Trump and I often say, peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace.
For decades, Iran thought that it could say death to America and death to Israel without actually fighting these countries. Now it knows how fighting Israel looks like. It also knows that even Donald Trump, who had banked so much of his political career on not wanting to start forever wars or not wanting to wars, he would not hesitate from attacking Iran.
After the U.S. airstrikes, Iran and Israel continued fighting, despite Trump declaring a ceasefire.
You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
But soon, the war came to an end.
That bombardment is a crime. We are for dialogue. We want to engage, but the Americans have, failed the test. They have failed the exam. So they have to come and explain to us as to why they chose, war instead of diplomacy.
The extent of the damage to Iran's nuclear facilities remained unclear, but Israel was confident the program had been set back.
It will take them, I don't know, years to rebuild it. And if the Iranians decide to rebuild a facility which we will be sure is connected to their nuclear military project, we will destroy it. As simple as that.
In the months that followed, Israel would agree to a ceasefire with Hamas and bring home the remaining hostages. Around 90% of Gaza's population had been displaced. Tens of thousands killed. And the Israeli military was occupying more than half the territory. The threat from Iran's proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah, had been pushed back. But it would soon become clear that Netanyahu was not done with Iran. In late December, Netanyahu arrived at Mar-a-Lago with fresh concerns about Iran. Israeli intelligence claimed that the regime had been rapidly replenishing its ballistic missile stockpiles.
This is what became Bibi Netanyahu's obsession, because some of those missiles had made it through during the 12-day war, hit Tel Aviv and so forth, and he did not want to let that inventory build up. And he begins lobbying on that point.
We've never had a friend, even close, a friend, as President Trump in the White House.
Netanyahu makes a very strong case that he needs to go after the missiles, that he'd love to do it with the United States. It's not clear to us yet whether Trump was sold on this at that time.
Iran may be behaving badly. It hasn't been confirmed, but if it's confirmed, look, they know the consequences. Consequences will be very powerful, maybe more powerful than the last time.
Then, in January,
the protests in Iran have grown. The crackdown more deadly.
Dramatic developments inside Iran started moving Trump towards taking action.
President Trump is now warning that if Iran kills peaceful protesters, the U.S. will intervene.
The administration all of a sudden begins a huge military buildup around Iran. And the topic matter turns from human rights to the nuclear program again.
Although neither Trump nor Netanyahu were presenting new evidence of an imminent nuclear threat, Satellite imagery was showing cleanup work at sites that had been bombed in June. Along with an aircraft carrier, Trump once again sent Steve Witkoff, as well as his son-in-law Jared Kushner, armed with even bigger demands than the last time.
We're putting absolutely maximalist goals on the table, and unless you come to the table urgently and sign, I'm going to attack you. And there was absolutely no evidence that anything of consequence has had happened with Iran's nuclear program between June of 2025 and January of 2026, which would warrant this kind of urgency.
I'd rather make a deal. It's got to be a good deal. No nuclear weapons, no missiles, no this, no that, all the different things that you want. But some people worry that they've been very dishonest with us over the years, right?
Behind the scenes at the White House, Netanyahu continued to press for going to war.
Netanyahu comes with a message to the president, which is, we're going to go ahead. And by the way, when we go ahead, go ask your own guys what's going to happen to you, because the Iranians are going to respond by hitting U.S. bases. So you might as well join us at the beginning, because you'll end up joining us in the first 12 hours anyway. Donald Trump's answer was essentially, okay, we'll do it together.
Israel's defense minister has confirmed it's launched an attack on Iran.
U.S. strikes on Iran are now underway.
Within the first 24 hours, the strikes had killed Iran's supreme leader and other top officials.
The supreme leader of the Iranian terrorist regime is dead.
U.S. and Israel pummeling Iranian missile bases deep underground.
A reported airstrike hit a girls' school over the weekend.
The regime began launching missiles into Israel and at U.S. bases in the region.
Strikes in Doha, where the Al Udeid Air Base is located. 6 Iowa Army reservists killed in Sunday's strike.
Intensifying military conflict, which has spiraled into a full-blown regional war.
We are defending ourselves. We have not started this war of aggression. This war has imposed on us, and we will continue to defend ourselves to the best of our abilities.
With the fighting intensifying, the Trump administration has offered differing justifications for the war.
The more you listen to the rationales, the more confusing it gets, because the rationales keep changing.
Iran's a very powerful country. They were going to take over the Middle East. If we did not hit them, they were going to take over the Middle East.
The imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us.
Iran had a conventional gun to our head as they tried to lie their way to a nuclear bomb.
This all raises the question, is this a war of opportunity or of necessity?
This is a war of choice. We don't have any evidence that the Iranians were preparing to strike Israel or the United States. This was a preventive, not a preemptive war. And in international law, that is considered completely off limits, because if you had a world of nothing but preventive wars, you'd have war all the time.
So there is this question here, whether this is in fact a war of choice.
Yes, I know all these slogans. If it's not imminent, it's a war of choice. No. This notion that if the other side is not killing you, you don't kill him, and you let him the time to prepare you be killed in the future, and you don't do anything because it's not imminent, it's stupid. This is the mistake that we did before the 7th of October. It was not imminent, so we let them to be stronger. And then when they felt they are strong enough, they surprise us. At least Israel is not going to behave that way in the future.
I mean, doesn't that fly in the face of what international law is all about?
Maybe, but we know what is the alternative.
In recent days, Israel has begun a new offensive against the remnants of Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Dozens of people, more than 50 in fact, have been killed.
Hundreds of thousands of people have been on the move.
At what point does this war end?
When both sides, the Americans and the Israelis, will sit together and say, they're weak enough. The regime, whoever will be the regime, cannot harm not Israel, not the neighborhood, not America for sure. What we want to destroy is the ability of the Iranians to attack others.
Speaking on American television, the Iranian leadership has remained defiant.
They have, started this war unprovoked, unwarranted, illegally, and what we are doing is legal act of self-defense, and we have every right to do that.
President Trump is now threatening Iran with complete destruction and has promised a new regional order.
There is a new Middle East being made because the series of wars since October 7th has actually broken the old Middle East. But the result of these wars has not been satisfactory. There is not a peace treaty or an end game for Gaza. There's not an end to Lebanon that all Lebanese see as good closure. There is no end to Syria yet, and there is no end to Iran yet. You're not going to end up with peace and prosperity without actually laying the political foundations for it. The military foundations is fine. Many people are celebrating it, the destruction of the axis of resistance. But what is coming in its stead? What's the political settlement that's going to heal these wounds? It doesn't exist yet.
Hey, you guys. What did you think about that? Are we still friends? That was a lot. Before I go, let me show you Iran's response, their latest response to the United States. Okay. Doc, did you like that? I didn't know, you guys, but I wanted to recap the war for you and what's happening in Iran. And if you like that one, later I'm going to show you one. Hang on. Let me share this before I go. If I have it here. Of course I do. Old school, how are you? Hey, you guys. All right, let me share this with you before I go. Hold on. There we go.
U.S. troops out of Germany as NATO nations continue to fall short on helping Iran.
Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader is making new threats against the U.S. and our allies.
Our senior White House correspondent, Jackie Heinrich, joins us now with the latest. Hey, Jackie.
Look at this.
Good morning, guys. More than 1/5 of U.S. active duty troops overseas are based in Germany, about 35,000. And now President Trump is threatening a drawdown after German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said Iran is, quote, humiliating the United States. President Trump posted this. The United States is studying and reviewing the possible reduction of troops in Germany with a determination to be made over the next short period of time. Thank you for your attention to this matter. His frustration bubbled over after Merz spoke to a group of German students.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate you.
The Americans clearly have no strategy. An entire nation is being humiliated by the Iranian state leadership, especially by these so-called Revolutionary Guards.
President Trump posted Tuesday, the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, thinks it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. He doesn't know what he's talking about. If Iran had a nuclear weapon, the whole world would be held hostage. I am doing something with Iran right now that other nations or presidents should have done long ago. No wonder Germany is doing so poorly, both economically and otherwise. Now the Chancellor is trying to smooth things over, saying he still has a good relationship with President Trump, and he's expressed his doubts about the war since the beginning. He added that Germany must live up to its leading military role in Europe. President Trump says all this could go away if Iran would just cry uncle and agree to end their nuclear program. But the Supreme Leader vowed to protect Iran's nuclear program as a national asset in a written statement this morning, saying, quote, we and our neighbors across the waters of the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman share a common destiny. Foreigners who come from thousands of kilometers away to act with greed and malice there have no place in it. It except at the bottom of its waters. Today, President Trump will be briefed on possible military plans by CENTCOM commander. According to reports, though, he has already expressed a preference for an extended naval blockade, saying it is more effective at degrading what's left of the Iranian regime and also reducing its revenue generators like its oil. Guys.
Hey, Jackie, are you jealous of me because I had an exclusive on Sunday night and I got an exclusive that you couldn't get because I had you and your fiance on at the same time? Is there a little bit of bitterness because I got the exclusive and you didn't?
I was so honored to do our first appearance together with you, Brian. So it was friendly media appearance.
Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick. Unfortunately, we both went through things together, so it was great to get both of your perspectives. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jackie.
So let's talk about Iran. I mean, right now, it looks as though the president's getting frustrated. I think they were able to absorb a lot of the economic pain. I mean, here in America, you get gas at $4 a gallon. It's panic politically. In Iran, it's so different. The people are so tortured on a regular basis. Their life is so, sadly, so miserable that when you just tell them their money's worthless, that food is gone, your jobs are gone, they don't care. They have the guns. They got the twisted interpretation of Islam, and they're going to be able to withstand it. Unfortunately, I think the only logical thing is probably the option the president doesn't want to do, and I can understand it. It's go back militarily. We have the targets. We've now had a few weeks to arm up the Arab states. Israel has come into the UAE and said, take some of our Iron Dome. We know they're going to target there again, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia, and just go take them out.
I think it's true that he doesn't want to do it, but he'll do it if it's necessary. And I think when it comes to, we got to look at this pain a little different when it comes to economic. Any type of pressure on the people, they don't care about. So when we talk about economic pain, that's not going to impact them. But when it comes to the economic pain, straining their military and them being able to buy weapons and fund their terror proxies, that will hurt them.
And that's what Besant did with crypto.
Bingo. So I think that's what they're focused on right now. You know, there are some reports that the Gulf states may get involved on this next round. I would like to see that happen.
And there are different stories about our depletion of our missile stockpiles. They're worried about, some people are worried about, are we using too many? Do we have enough in our arsenal now of the Patriot interceptors, the Tomahawk cruise missiles, the Joint Air to Surface standoff missiles? Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of War, and General Raising Kane are saying that we are well supplied. The Pentagon is saying that we are well supplied, that our reserves remain robust. And J.D. Vance, our vice president, he was on the Will Cain show and he was talking about our military readiness. Listen to this.
Of course, I'm concerned about, our readiness, because that's my job to be concerned. But I think that Pete Hegseth, our Department of War secretary, I think General Kane, our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they're doing an amazing job. But it's, of course, my job to ask these questions. It's, of course, my job to make sure that we're on top of every issue. And, of course, it's the president's job, too. And I think that both of us are very focused on that. But we've got a great military, a military that can do a lot, Will. So don't believe everything you read, especially in papers like The Atlantic.
This whole mission is for the West and for the Middle East. And what the president's astounded by, I imagine, and all of us should be, is that Europe knows they're in the line of fire. They know they got missiles that can hit their capitals. They know they've let their personal military wither. They know that we're the ones who have to watch their backs, supply the people, supply the weapons, build the bases. Not only have they not supported it, they've limited our use of bases in the region. And then for the Chancellor of Germany to say we're being humiliated. If you have a problem with the strategy, you just said you have a great relationship with the president. Call up and say, Mr. President, what's your strategy? Because maybe I can relay it to my people. I'm going to be making a series of speeches. People in Germany are feeling the pinch economically. So I'd like to know what you're doing. That's what allies do. Those statements are now what allies do. That's a guy afraid of his Muslim constituency.
How would we be humiliated? We are trying to make sure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. That was the mission here, to make sure that they hand over their enriched uranium, because they said they had enough to build, was it 9 to 11 nuclear weapons? We can't allow Iran to do that. So we went in and we're trying to stop them. They have a labor crisis now. They've lost 1 million jobs. They have a currency collapse. They have hyperinflation. Food prices have gone through the roof. Chicken is up 75% there. 2 major steel producers are halted now, their production, which means 20 to 30% of Iran's steel export. The strikes have damaged 20,000 factories. That's 20% of Iran's total production units. We have not allowed them to trade, not allowed them to ship oil out of their ports because we are occupying the Strait of Hormuz. How are we humiliated?
Right.
We look tough.
It's only a matter of time before the president finishes the job up.
Did you guys hear that? It's only a matter of time before the president finishes the job. I can't wait for this to end. All right, you guys. Thank you guys so much for... Krista said it well. What did she say? Ignorance knows no race, gender, or boundaries. That's right. That's right. You guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I have another documentary for you later. There's not much new going. I have another documentary for you guys later, and maybe an open panel if I can squeeze one in. I'm praying for the country. I'm praying for all of you. Let's make America great. And I will talk to you as I can watch the news and talk about this stuff all day. I'll be back later. I'm gonna lay it down for a little bit, and you guys be safe, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye. Wait, I'm still live? I'm still live. Thank you for your donation, Rebecca. Thank you guys. I'm still live. I don't know why. My closing news, Rebecca. Thank you for your donation. I appreciate you guys. I don't know why I'm still here. I'm just waiting for this to end. Okay, bye.